Chapter 823. Unparalleled wonder was speechless by his subordinates. He never knew that his employees had such a big grudge against the studio. Amidst this powerful crusade, 2 more directors who were hesitant stood up. The number of people asking to resign had reached 15. Of the remaining 4, 3 were still hesitating. Wuyi was still at a loss and didn't know what to do. Everyone had been dug out except for him. Wuyi was currently thinking about this problem with all his might. In the industry, Wuyi didn't think that he was worse than any of the 18 directors in terms of ability and reputation. Why was he excluded? Why was that? After all, this was a dispute in the industry. Wuyi didn't think that the hatred he had with a very powerful person would have such an impact. Don't worry about Wuyi. This was what Han family young master had told Yuntung and the others. Wuyi took out a letter from his pocket and handed it to Unparalleled Wonder. He said expressionlessly, "This is my resignation letter. I hope you can decide on my successor as soon as possible. I will finish the work within a month. After a month, I need to start a new job. I'm afraid I won't have time." At first, Wuyi was very timid and wanted to talk to the boss in private. However, after finding a group of comrades, he suddenly became very brave. No one present knew that this incident was actually planned by Wu Ye's Cloud Tongue studio. Wuyi couldn't wait to resign in public at the regular meeting, which was also part of their provocative plan. Wuyi had worked for Ng Chiyi for some time. After he had a deep understanding of this industry, he decided to go solo. Later, he established Yuntung Studio with his 2 friends, Yuntung and Nitrite Radical, and the business was quite good. In the process, they used a lot of resources from Ng Chi, which was quite unkind. However, the special nature of the studio gave her such an opportunity. It was only a matter of time before she left Ng Chi. Now that she had such an opportunity, she simply made a fuss at the regular meeting. Unparalleled Wonder looked at Wu Ye's resignation letter and didn't take it. He looked at the others and said, "What about you? Are you going to do the same?" The others were not as well prepared as Wu Yi. They had just received the poaching letter not too long ago, so they were still hesitating about it. But he didn't have the determination to even write his resignation letter. But at this time, he had already stood up and shed all pretense of cordiality with the boss at the regular meeting. There was no way back, so there was nothing to hesitate about. Some immediately took out a pen and paper to write on the spot, while others directly said, "Anyway, we already know. That's the situation. Let's forget about the resignation letter." Some even gave Gai Shuring a slip of paper with only 3 words on it. "I resign." Gai Shuring was so angry that he trembled. Without another word, Wu Yi saw that Matchless Wonder didn't want to accept her letter, so she put it on the ground, let out a long sigh, and turned to leave. The others also followed suit and left Ng Chi Studios' base in Moonlit Night City. There were only 5 people left in the room. 3 of them lowered their heads and didn't speak, their hearts full of worries. Unparalleled Genius could no longer smile. His face was filled with anger. Wu Yi felt like he was squeezed into a crack. He looked here and there, not knowing what to do. After all, Unparalleled Genius was the founder and leader of the largest studio, so he had the ability to take a blow. He quickly calmed down and stared at the last 4 people in front of him. He only said 3 words. "What about you?" The 3 people finally raised their heads, and one of them said, "Boss, I need to think about it. It's better for me to leave first." Then he got up and left the room. The other person quickly said, "Me too." Then he hurriedly left. Out of the 19 directors, only 2 were left. One was Wu Yi, and the other was his good friend. His ID was 9-5. 9-5 was like Wu Yi, a person with a lot of thoughts. He hesitated until the end, thinking about it in his heart. But he wouldn't be like those 2 idiots and directly tell his boss to think about it. Wouldn't that leave a thorn in his boss's heart? 9-5 decided to observe how his boss would respond. At first, he didn't know that the other party would be so aggressive in poaching people. He actually emptied Ng Chi. Now, 15 out of 19 directors had left. 2 of them had gone to consider, and most likely wouldn't be able to come back. At this time, wouldn't the remaining people also welcome an unprecedented opportunity for development? Therefore, under his boss's gaze, 9-5 tried to look as determined as possible. In comparison, Wu Yi seemed a little distracted. 9 to 5 was a little afraid that his boss would ask them to express their stance, so he decided to strike first. "Boss, what should we do?" Before his boss could reply, Wu Yi sent him a private message. "You're not leaving? We'll see." 9 to 5 didn't want to answer this sensitive question directly, but Wu Yi didn't know how to be tactful. He felt helpless. Matchless Hero looked at the two of them. He was glad that there were still people he could use. He thought for a moment and said, "I'll leave their work to you two for now. 5 nights. Leave the matters of Moonlit Night City to the person in charge first. The next step is to find someone to replace them as soon as possible. Do you have any suitable candidates to recommend?" Both of them were silent. These two fellows were not easy to deal with. At this time, 9 to 5 was greedy. He didn't care whether he could manage it or not. At this time, there were only him and Wu Yi left. He might as well take charge of 50 cities each. Their income was directly linked to their business. With business in 50 main cities, their status and income would soar. At this time, if he were to take the initiative to find someone to share the food with him, he would of course not cooperate. Wu Yi shook his head and said, "I don't have any suitable people on my side." 9 to 5 snickered in his heart. He guessed that Wu Yi was thinking the same thing as him. Unfortunately, Matchless Hero didn't seem to have the same intention. He immediately said, "Immediately gather all the people in charge and assistants of the main cities. I want to interview them personally, and make an exception to promote people from within." 9 to 5 was naturally unhappy, but Wu Yi immediately jumped up. "I'll do it." 9 to 5 looked at him in surprise. Matchless Hero nodded and said, "Online and offline, no matter what you have on hand, immediately gather them. If you don't know their contact information, ask those guys for it." These people in charge of the main cities were the direct subordinates of the directors. Wu Yi naturally had the contact information of the 6 cities, but he might not have the information of the other cities. "I understand." Wu Yi nodded and quickly left. 9 to 5 was completely stunned. What was this guy planning? Wu Yi actually didn't have any plans. It was just that the system suddenly notified him that he had a new email. This email made him heave a long sigh of relief. He guessed that this was a headhunting email, but he didn't know why it was only sent to him now. Wu Yi had always felt very uneasy about being isolated. Now that he received the email, of course he couldn't wait to take a look. As for whether he should stay or leave, that was what 9 to 5 said. Take a look first. Wu Yi went straight to his mailbox and quickly took out the email. But after reading it, he was dumbfounded. Not only was this email not a headhunting email for him, but it was a resignation letter. The director and assistant of Whitestone City, one of the 6 cities he was in charge of, had jointly sent him a resignation letter. Wu Yi saw that the two of them were online and quickly sent a private message, but it was like a stone thrown into the sea. Wu Yi sent a few more messages, but still no one responded. If the message could be sent, it meant that the friend had not been deleted. But if they were so determined not to reply, it was most likely that they had been blacklisted. The director and assistant of Whitestone City resigned. Did this matter have anything to do with the director's collective resignation? Wu Yi suddenly felt a deep sense of fear. He found that the other party's headhunting operation was far more ferocious than he had imagined. The 2 subordinates of his Whitestone City were not that outstanding compared to the other main cities. If the other party really wanted to headhunt second-rate talents, they wouldn't specifically pick the 2 of them. This was probably the same as headhunting directors, a headhunting method to catch them all. Did the other party want to empty Ying Qi in one go? Wu Yi was stunned, especially since he was completely isolated. What should he do? An empty shell of Ying Qi and him for Wu Yi? Even if the boss completely trusted him and entrusted him, how could he handle such a big business alone? This was not the general direction of the boss. The director had a lot of trivial matters to deal with. It was impossible for one person to deal with 100 main cities. If he couldn't get through this stage, wouldn't Ying Qi be finished? Wu Ye's mind was full of unlucky guesses. He had completely forgotten why he lied to the boss and ran out. He was dazed for a long time before he regained his senses. This was because another message had been sent. Wu Yi quickly opened the message. This time, his guess was completely confirmed. The director of Muyu City, one of the 6 cities he was in charge of, had resigned. Who is it that headhunted you? Wu Yi immediately replied. Silence, silence again. Wu Yi was flustered and exasperated. A bunch of random messages were thrown into the sea. He was blacklisted again. At this moment, 9 to 5 also sent him a message. The situation doesn't seem right. What? Wu Yi understood that 9 to 5 subordinates might have made a move. One of my subordinates just said that he wants to resign. 9 to 5 said. Who is it that is headhunting you? Wu Yi was really anxious. He wanted to know the answer. This answer might explain why he was isolated. Ying Qi had long been thrown out of Wu Ye's mind. At this moment he was only thinking about his own future. In the end, 9 to 5 still avoided answering. I'm also very curious. Why are you the only one being excluded? Is it an oversight, or did you offend someone recently? 9 to 5 was cunning. He realized that the other party's headhunting was simply a storm. After realizing that Ying Qi was in danger of sinking, he stopped fantasizing about being the director of 50 cities. If all the second-tier members were poached, even if he was the director of 100 cities, he would just be a commander without an army. How could he carry out his work? Who would he show his power to? As the leader of the industry, Ying Qi might not fall just like that. However, he would definitely go through a period of darkness. 9 to 5 didn't want to be in a terrible situation with the unparalleled talent. At this moment, he was a little sympathetic towards Wu Yi. This was because he had a way out. A new job contract with a good salary had already been sent to his email. But what about Wu Yi? It looked like he was thrown alone on a huge ship that was about to collapse. If this guy really offended someone, then the opponent's move was really vicious. I haven't been in contact with any studios recently, Wu Yi replied. It might not be a studio. Maybe it's some influential role? 9 to 5 said. Could it be Qianli's drunken? Wu Yi could only think of this. He does have some influence among gamers, but he can't interfere with our industry, right? 9 to 5 said. Maybe he has some backing? Wu Yi said. This. 9 to 5 had only heard of Qianli's drunken name. He wasn't afraid of this kind of crazy killer in the game, nor was he interested. Think about his equipment. The Dark Knight streamer sword? What the hell was that? It seems like it's not on the same level as the current players. The more Wu Yi thought about it, the more terrified he became. Qianli's drunken was in existence like a bug that had never existed in the history of online games. This guy might really have some backing. His strength might be due to some shady dealings in the game. Just as Wu Yi was thinking about this, a person suddenly dashed past him like the wind. After a few steps he suddenly stopped, turned around and looked at Wu Yi. Huh, what a coincidence. Fuck. Wu Yi was dumbfounded. This guy was definitely shady dealings. Otherwise, why would he appear the moment he thought of him? Could it be that the game company was monitoring his thoughts? Wu Ye's high-speed fantasies entered the realm of science fiction. What are you doing? Gu Fei asked as he walked over with his sword. Nothing. Wu Yi actually replied. Seeing that Qianli was obviously going to cut him down, Wu Yi had nowhere to run, so he asked, Are you the one behind the poaching of our studio? In the end, the latter half of the sentence was completed at the revival point. I think he said something. Gu Fei scratched his head. The sword is too fast. I can't control the power of the spell with my own strength. Sigh, I can't hold it back. Gu Fei mumbled as he sent a message to Yin Zhongmu. He told him that he had sent a high-ranking member of England Qi to the revival point, and described Wu Ye's class, outfit, and appearance. In a chaotic city, the revival point was always the most crowded place. Of course, the 10 Society Alliance had troops stationed there. Yin Zhongmu's order was quickly sent over, and the people of the 10 Society Alliance immediately started investigating. Soon, they found a suspicious person. It was a guy who was walking out of the revival point with a sad and angry face. A few people quickly went up to him and asked, Is it Wu Yi? Ah, it's me. What's the matter? This was Wu Ye's habitual answer. He was a businessman in the studio, not a fugitive. He never hid his needs. Nothing, I'm just looking for you. After saying this, the other party hacked Wu Yi back to the revival point. Fuck. Wu Yi revived, but he could still see the other party's mocking expression. Although levels were not important to Wu Ye's job, he could still play games to pass the time. Being killed consecutively like this was naturally quite infuriating. However, when he saw the badge on the chest of the people who killed him, he recognized that they were members of the Ten Society Alliance. Wu Yi immediately knew what was going on. Not only did Qianli kill him in a drunken stupor, he even paved a way for him to escape. Wu Yi was dumbfounded. The Ten Society Alliance killed so many people. In fact, they didn't know much about who was in the studio. Now he was trapped here. How could he still get out? 5 Knights thought of a legendary character, Silvermoon. Silvermoon was the embodiment of the 10 Guild Alliance's patience and persistence towards their enemies. 5 Knights realized that he had replaced Silvermoon's position in the hearts of the 10 Guild Alliance's players. However, the problem was that he did not provoke them at all. It was when he was dealing with them that they begged for nothing. How could 5 Knights explain this to them? Wu Yi couldn't even take a step out of the revival point. His boss, Matchless Wonder, sent a message to urge him. Wu Yi had already given up. He guessed that it was not an oversight that he was abandoned in the midst of the poaching storm. It was most likely the doing of Qianli's drunken stupor. He had no other choice now. He could only hang on with Ying Qi. This way, it would be best to let his boss understand the whole situation as soon as possible, and let him make a decision as soon as possible. Hence, Wu Yi quickly explained their situation to Unparalleled Wonder. They, Wonder, were being poached from all directions, and the only blind spot was him, Wu Yi. Matchless Wonder was completely enraged. He didn't expect the other party to be so ruthless. He couldn't control himself anymore, and sent a message to the bosses of the other studios. Who's messing with me? Come at me directly. However, the replies were all puzzled. The studios that Matchless Wonder had befriended were all big names. Yinteng was a new studio that Matchless Wonder had yet to befriend. 9 to 5 was bewildered. He looked at Matchless Wonder, who was so angry that he looked like he was going to tear down the house. Matchless Wonder didn't care about 9 to 5. He angrily slammed the door and left. Boss. Wu Yi suddenly froze. He didn't expect his boss to appear in front of him in an instant. Fuck. Matchless Wonder was going crazy. He had wanted to go out with a belly full of anger. However, he was ambushed the moment he stepped out. He didn't even see who it was before he was killed. This wasn't strange. Who asked them to have Wu Yi? Of course, Wu Yi didn't have the intention to kill him. However, when the situation turned to Han Family Young Master, it was naturally a different story. With Han Family Young Master's remote command, when Yun Zhongmu heard that he could even kill Ying Qi's big boss, he excitedly led his team over. What was depressing was that he didn't even get to touch his sword before he was attacked by his subordinates' long-range attacks. Everyone could see that this guy's equipment was really luxurious. It was the happiest to get some equipment during a battle. Chapter 824. Heaven's Wonder and 5 Knights had the same class. They were both archers. Because they were here to earn money. Time was money. Naturally, they chose this class that had the fastest movement speed. This way, they wouldn't have to waste a lot of time on traveling. At this time, the two of them were gathered at the archer shooting range in Moonlit Night City. This resurrection point immediately became the most crowded place. After Yun Zhongmu gave the order, there was a lot of commotion. Some people heard that the higher-ups of Fancy Workshop had been captured, and were already stretching their necks to ask, which one? At this time, there was new news that the big boss of Fancy Workshop had also been captured. Thus, the crowd became even more excited, and the which one voices became even louder. The revival point was safe, and they could enter without any worries to look at these two animals. At this time, more and more people gathered at the archer shooting range. Everyone looked around. Someone pointed out 5 Knights, and he quickly attracted a lot of attention. No one knew Heaven's Wonder Workshop yet, but it was obvious that he was beside 5 Knights. Everyone immediately knew who he was, so they looked and appraised him, leaving behind a series of praises. His equipment is not bad. As expected of the big boss. Yeah, look at that bow. Enhanced snipe and double arrow. I've never seen a weapon that can be enhanced with 2 skills. Have you seen his hat before? Enhanced eagle eye. Have you seen a hat with enhanced skills? Damn, his clothes are light armor. Its defense is even higher than my heavy armor. His shoes are fast too. The necklace adds so much agility. Ring adds marksmanship mastery. Heaven's Wonder Workshop was surrounded and appraised by the crowd. One by one, his equipment was taken down by the crowd. If it wasn't for the protection of the resurrection point, there was no guarantee that these people wouldn't lose their minds and rush over to take his equipment. The people around the two of them were amazed. Someone outside the circle shouted, "It's our turn, it's our turn. Let's take a look too." Guy Shurying and 5 knights were extremely depressed. They were like monkeys in a zoo, and Guy Shurying was especially so. Compared to 5 knights, who was a high-level executive, he was more attractive as a big boss, especially with his equipment. It was a pleasure to have equipment that attracted people's attention, but would Heaven's Wonder Workshop be in the mood for that? In order to avoid the harassment, he took off his equipment and put it in his pocket. He then put on some ragged clothes and asked, "Where's your guild leader? I want to see him." Seeing Monkey speak, the players quieted down. Then someone walked out from the crowd and stood in front of Heaven's Wonder Workshop. "What do you have to say?" Heaven's Wonder Workshop controlled his emotions and tried to be as sincere as he could. "If there's anything, we can sit down and talk." The person laughed out loud, looking very flashy. "You don't have to sit down. Give me 80,000 or 100,000 yuan, and I can consider letting you out of this resurrection point." The players cheered. Most of the players didn't have a good impression of the gaming studios amassing money in the game, especially from the players. Now that there was a chance to amass money from the gaming studios, everyone was excited. To everyone's surprise, Matchless Genius nodded and said calmly, "We can sit down and talk. Anything is negotiable." The newcomer was obviously very surprised. He scratched his head awkwardly amidst the laughter around him, as if he didn't know how to respond. On the other hand, 5 knights had long felt that something was amiss. The boss of the 10 Guild Alliance, Yin Zhongmu, was a thief. At the very least, everyone knew about this. However, the person in front of him was clearly a warrior. Even though the boss of the 10 Guild Alliance was high and mighty, he still frequently played games for fun. The 10 Guild Alliance was so famous, and Yin Zhongmu was a character that was ranked in the top 5. There was no way that he wouldn't know, right? The guy in front of them was obviously pretending to be ignorant and making fun of them. 5 Knights was hesitating about whether he should warn his boss, but Unparalleled Wonder smiled and said, "Can't you make the decision? Can you let me see someone who can make decisions?" Only then did Wu Yi come to a realization. As expected of the boss, he was able to keep his composure. He clearly knew that the guy in front of him was a fool, but he still patiently dealt with him. Amidst the laughter of the surrounding players, someone started to mock him. "Zhu Xian, you're still far from being the boss. Hurry up and come down." Zhu Xian was quite thick-skinned. He turned around and laughed. "Why am I not the boss? Am I not the guild leader? This guy just asked your guild leader." "Fuck, am I not the guild leader?" The 10 Guild Alliance was formed by 10 guilds. Zhu Xian was indeed the guild leader of one of the 10 guilds. Of course, it was true that he was the guild leader. However, in the concept of the 10 Guild Alliance, they were all one guild. The system's classification was not valid. Zhu Xian's use of this as an excuse was seen as shameless by everyone. From this, it could be seen that Zhu Xian, the so-called guild leader, had no weight at all. If it wasn't for the system's rule that every guild must have a guild leader, he probably wouldn't even have this title. Amidst the quarrel between the brothers, Unparalleled Wonder and 5 Knights seemed to be intentionally or unintentionally ignored. Unparalleled Wonder continued to remain calm, and patiently waited for these people to finish quarreling. He continued to look at Zhu Xian, the guild leader, with a questioning gaze. Zhu Xian didn't expect his negotiation opponent to be so calm and difficult to deal with. He felt like he couldn't handle it anymore. He cursed himself for coming out to steal the limelight. He could only hope that boss Yin Zhongmu would come over quickly. Unparalleled Wonder saw that the other party didn't speak, But he wasn't in a hurry. At least the situation of being watched like a monkey had stopped. After a few words, although he and 5 knights were just 2 people with little power, they seemed to be on equal footing with the other party's people. One had to say that this was the aura. A leader like Unparalleled Wonder had quite the aura. The sightseeing for the 2 of them had stopped, but the archer shooting range and the battle royale in Moonlit Night City still had to continue. Just in time for the enemy to organize a wave of people to attack the archer shooting range. The 10 Meetings Alliance players who were watching the 2 of them hurriedly turned around to counterattack. However, they still carefully left a few people to keep an eye on Unparalleled Wonder and 5 knights. Unparalleled Wonder didn't speak, and 5 knights didn't know what his boss was planning. He didn't have any other way out, so he could only quietly stand guard at the side. When he was blocked here, Wuxia had thought of quickly calling for the arrogant emperor, and Weed to quickly organize people to rescue him. However, he immediately thought that the 2 brats, the arrogant emperor and Weed, had definitely been dug up by the other party. It was hard to say if they would still do their best, so he gave up on this idea. In the end, Proud Emperor and Weed sent a message to inform 5 knights that they also wanted to resign. These 2 people were originally leading the guild to fight against Yun Zhongmu. There was a new email in their mailbox, but the 2 of them didn't have the time to read it. Later on, a colleague who was on good terms with them asked about this, so the 2 of them hurriedly ran to take a look at the email. They were the last 2 people in the entire Eagle Alliance to find out about the poaching email. Of course, the 2 of them also hesitated, but very quickly, a new battle report came. 5 knights and even their boss were blocked at the revival point by the 10 Guilds Alliance. The 2 of them immediately felt that the Eagle Workshop was in big trouble this time, and the other party's generous offer was right in front of them. From the moment they received the poaching email to the moment they made the decision, these 2 could be said to be the fastest. After casually calling 5 knights, the 2 of them immediately left the guild without saying a word. The 2 of them had already become a source of trouble in Moonlit Night City. The 2 of them believed that their new master would definitely not be interested in taking in these troublemakers, so they made a prompt decision to leave the guild and blacklist all the members of their original guild. Then they went to their new master alone. The 2 leaders of the 2 guilds that were fighting against the 10 Guilds Alliance suddenly left the guild. This was too heavy a bomb. Just a few minutes ago, the 2 of them were still in a tug-of-war at the revival point. Why did they suddenly leave the guild without saying a word? The 2 guilds were in chaos. They were already powerless in the fight against the 10 Guilds Alliance, and now that even their leaders had left, the morale of their troops was naturally in chaos. In a short period of time, there were many players who left the guild. The originally 2 level 5 guilds were on the verge of disbanding in an instant. Some people were originally fighting on the battlefield, but in the next second, they suddenly left the guild without looking back, making the 10 Guilds Alliance a little confused. Something suddenly happened to the other party, and this was too obvious on the scene. Many people suddenly began to run away. With the 2 leading guilds being so disorganized, the remaining allied guilds were also quickly affected. Moreover, without the support of these 2 guilds, they were even less of a match for the 10 Guilds Alliance. Some left, some gave in, and some gave in. Along the way from Eagle Workshop's encampment to the archer shooting range, Cloud Twilight continuously received the good news of victory. When he arrived at the archer shooting range, the chaotic battle in Moonlit Night City was almost over. Those who were still fighting were the ones who were not well informed. They still didn't know that the 2 leading guilds had already fallen. Everyone's allies were already terrified, and were still shouting, "Down with the 10 Guilds Alliance." The impact on the archer shooting range was naturally easily defeated. Zhu Xian led everyone back, and just happened to see Cloud Twilight's group coming over. He immediately went over and told him that the boss of Eagle Workshop wanted to have a good chat with them. Cloud Twilight coldly laughed and stepped into the revival point. When the 10 Guilds Alliance players saw that their boss had arrived, they all made way. Cloud Twilight also walked in front of Matchless Genius. Matchless Genius had a smile on his face. "Looks like this is the famous boss Cloud Twilight." "Don't give me that." Cloud Twilight waved his hand. "If you have something to say, just say it." Matchless Genius didn't get angry and continued. "Isn't this a bit of a misunderstanding?" "Misunderstanding? What kind of misunderstanding? Cloud Twilight asked. There shouldn't be any conflict between us. You're saying that we're looking for trouble, Cloud Twilight said. You can't say that. Of course there is, but it's a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? The ambush on Black Dragon Mountain Range. Weren't you guys behind it? Cloud Twilight said. I've already asked about it. It's true that we did it, but we weren't targeting the brothers of the 10 Guilds Alliance. Of course, in the end, we still caused you guys some losses, and we have to compensate for that. Matchless Genius said. Cloud Twilight coldly laughed. Of course I know who you guys are targeting. Qianli Drunk is a good friend of our 10 Guilds Alliance. Targeting him is the same as targeting us. You want to bribe us with money? Keep dreaming. Cloud Twilight was so hot-blooded, and didn't care about benefits at all. This made Matchless Genius speechless, and he could only helplessly say, So you're saying that there's no way for us to talk anymore? Absolutely not, Cloud Twilight resolutely said. Just try to find a way to get out of this door. Then you're underestimating me. Leaving here is too easy. Matchless Genius laughed, and took out a teleportation scroll from his pocket. This made Cloud Twilight speechless. He couldn't stop him at the revival point. Matchless Genius used the scroll, and the two of them immediately disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Why didn't you leave? After escaping from the teleportation, Matchless Genius unexpectedly asked Five Nights this question. At this moment, Five Nights felt that his loyalty to the studio was too fake, and so he told the truth. I had nowhere to go. Oh. Matchless Genius didn't understand. They didn't look for me this time, Five Nights said. Why is that? Matchless Genius was also confused. Five Nights shouldn't be so bad that no one wanted him. I suspect that this operation was caused by Qianli Drunk's group. From the leveling efficiency to the city rewards, I've met them twice, and I've offended them on both occasions. It's probably their revenge, Five Nights said. So you're saying that it's because of your actions that they've attacked us as a whole, Matchless Genius said. Five Nights was startled, and only now did he realize how much responsibility he had. How many of the people in charge of each city resigned? Matchless Genius knew that this wasn't the time to pursue this matter. Moreover, even he didn't think that a player could make such a big move. It was normal that Five Nights didn't think of the consequences, and there really wasn't anything to be punished for. I'm not sure about the other regions, but my people have already resigned from 3 cities, Five Nights said. You have 6 cities under you, right? Five Nights nodded. Most of the people in charge of the main cities aren't bound by any formal contracts. They can leave whenever they want, and it's even possible for them to leave without saying a word. How many do you think will be left? Matchless Genius said. I don't know, Five Nights said. These people are an important link in our studio. To be honest, taking them all away is even more serious than you directors being poached. Their loss has caused problems in our communication. Hurry up and contact the other directors, and tell them that we're going to do an inventory. As long as we have the goods, we don't need to panic. England won't fall that easily. But after these people leave, we can't use the game warehouse that's in their hands. We still have to move the goods, and we can't contact any reliable people right now. Five Nights said. Let the directors of each city be in charge of this. You just need to do the inventory, and then try to get in touch with the temporary workers at the bottom, and let them directly report to you, Matchless Genius said. I understand. Five Nights nodded. The higher the positions of the directors, the more restrictions they had. They all had a labor contract with the studio, so even if other directors announced their resignation, they had to spend a month to complete the handover. Moreover, a large amount of the goods in their hands were the assets of the studio, and if they dared to embezzle it, they would have to bear legal responsibility. But the employees below the director level were different. Most of them didn't have a formal contract, and many of them were promoted from temporary workers. They relied on their personal constraints and the supervision of the directors, and when it came to resignation, they couldn't do anything about it. But they didn't have to worry too much about taking the goods and leaving, because they knew the situation of these people. The resources of the studio were always in the hands of the directors, and only the directors had the authority to use the system warehouse rented in each city. Unrivaled Genius's arrangement gave Wuxia's confidence back. That's right, it was troublesome if the people left, but it wasn't to the point of collapse. They couldn't take the game's goods and gold coins that the studio had accumulated for a long time, and they didn't have enough manpower at the moment. But even if there were a few people who specialized in these goods, it would be enough to support the reputation of the studio for a period of time, and they could slowly recruit more people in the future. And now he, Five Nights, was about to take over all the goods of the studio. How much trust was this? It seemed that he had profited from a disaster, and his career was about to usher in another breakthrough. Five Nights, who had regained his confidence, happily went to contact the other directors. Many of these directors fell out with Matchless Genius, and although it was quite awkward, they knew that these were their responsibilities according to the contract. They also wanted to get out of this as soon as possible, so they didn't refuse, and asked when the inventory would start, and where the goods would be transferred to. Five Nights was startled, and hurriedly asked the boss for this question. You arrange the time, I'll mail the inventory list of each city to you later, and where to transfer it. I'll find someone to open a new warehouse, and when the time comes, I'll go with you, and you can transfer the goods with him. Five Nights was startled, not because of the boss's arrangement, but because he didn't think that the boss would have someone trustworthy. He thought that at this time, Matchless Genius was only left with him and the boss, the two commanders. All right, you can go now, Matchless Genius said. What about you, boss? Me? I have to take care of the matters of Moonlit Night City, Matchless Genius said. What do you mean? I don't understand. With that Yin Zhongmu and the 10 Meetings Alliance, how can we get involved in the business of Moonlit Night City in the future? And with such a group of people causing adverse effects, it will always be a hidden danger to our studio. More importantly, I won't let them ride on my head so easily. Don't the 10 Meetings Alliance like to fight and kill? Alright, I'll play with them. Matchless Genius's tone suddenly became extremely cold. In layman's terms, at this moment, Matchless Genius's aura was overflowing. Five Nights was startled. Chapter 825. There was no doubt that the boss's gaming skills weren't that good. The strength increased by the equipment was enough to deal with some noobs, and give him the upper hand in a one-on-one fight with some experts. However, it was impossible for him to kill tens of thousands of people single-handedly, like 1,000 miles drunk, and exhaust them mentally. However, Matchless Wonder dared to challenge him so confidently. Five Nights began to suspect that the boss actually had a hidden force. This group of people was probably mainly fighting. Five Nights and the others mainly worked in the game, and didn't have much time for entertainment. However, Matchless Wonder was different. The studio was on the right track, and he only needed to deal with things regularly. He had more free time. However, even though he had more free time, the boss of a successful studio wouldn't wholeheartedly use the game for entertainment. He didn't have much time to play the game every day. Even so, Matchless Wonder's level wasn't low. Level 42 shouldn't be something that a player who played at most 2 to 3 hours a day could achieve. However, Matchless Wonder was just like that. Although most people attributed this to Matchless Wonder's good equipment, there were many people in the game who had good equipment. It wasn't that Matchless Wonder and the others didn't doubt that equipment alone could achieve this. However, after all, these things had nothing to do with their work, so they just chatted casually. In fact, mocking the boss's gaming skills was what they did most of the time. Gossiping about the boss together was an activity that all the workers loved to see. At this moment, when Five Nights saw the boss so confidently saying that he was going to fight against the 10 Guilds Alliance, he suddenly had such a thought. There were people behind the boss. The boss could level up so efficiently because there was such a group of experts leading him. Five Nights and the others didn't know about this group of people. At this moment, it seemed that the boss was going to use this group of people. Since the boss had never mentioned these people to them, of course Five Nights didn't ask more. At this time, Matchless Wonder sent him to do something, so Five Nights could only leave with a stomach full of curiosity. In Moonlit Night City, although Matchless Wonder and Five Nights' teleportation scroll made Cloud Twilight and the others feel regretful, This battle was still considered a complete victory for the 10 Guilds Alliance. The big boss of the studio was beaten so badly by them, which was quite exciting. Everyone in the guild was cheering and going to celebrate. As for the celebration, it was nothing more than drinking. Cloud Twilight strongly invited Gu Fei to come. Of course, Gu Fei wasn't interested in drinking and partying. However, Yin Zhongmu had been very kind to them this time, so Gu Fei didn't want to embarrass him too much. Thus, he went to the tavern and showed his face, letting the heroes of the 10 Meetings Alliance see the true face of the #1 assassin. After casually chatting with Yin Zhongmu and the other familiar faces, Gu Fei used the excuse of completing a quest as an excuse to continue his wanted quest. The celebration of the 10 Societies Alliance was in full swing. A tavern could not hold all of them, so they drank from the tavern to the street, and from the street to the square. Many players from guilds that were on good terms with the 10 Guilds Alliance also came to join in the fun. Previously, the city was filled with PvP battles, but in the blink of an eye, it was like a celebration. The players of Moonlit City were just that straightforward. As the boss of the guild, Cloud Twilight was naturally the target of everyone's drinking. Getting drunk in the game didn't harm the body anyway, so it was quite realistic to simulate the state of being drunk. Cloud Twilight's alcohol tolerance was average. After a few rounds, he couldn't hold on anymore. He drank until he saw stars, but there was still an endless stream of people who wanted to continue drinking him. Cloud Twilight relied on his speed as a thief, so he used swift steps and began to run away. After getting drunk, Yin Zhongmu's feet were unsteady. Yin Zhongmu's swaying footsteps drew a string of roars of laughter. Yin Zhongmu didn't know either. He ran all the way to an empty alleyway. When he saw that no one was chasing him, he took a deep breath. These bastards mess with me like this. I can't hang around with them anymore. Cloud Twilight felt dizzy. Getting drunk in the game was also very uncomfortable. I wonder if I'll be fine when I go offline and log back in? With this thought, Cloud Twilight wanted to go to the revival point and try. However, when he turned around, he saw 2 masked assassins standing at the entrance of the alley, looking at him. "Are you the boss of the 10 Guilds Alliance?" asked the masked assassin. "That's me. Who are you guys?" Cloud Twilight replied indifferently. At this moment, his brain wasn't working. "Our boss told us to send you his regards," said the masked assassin. When Cloud Twilight heard this, he faintly felt that something wasn't right. He sobered up a bit and said in a daze, "Who's your boss?" "Unrivaled genius." After saying this, the 2 masked assassins suddenly moved, using swift steps. Cloud Twilight was also a thief-turned-assassin, so he could naturally see that these 2 were very skilled. They split up and launched a pincer attack at him from both sides. Cloud Twilight wasn't an easy character to deal with, but in his current state of drunkenness, he couldn't even walk steadily. He wanted to move forward, but his legs swayed and he fell right in front of the other party's sword. This assassin was quite ferocious. The flying dagger slashed towards Cloud Twilight's neck. Cloud Twilight had no time to react. He only felt his health drop by a large chunk. This assassin's attack power wasn't low. Attack power was a reflection of equipment. The guy in front of him had good equipment and outstanding skills. One of these characters was already very difficult to deal with, let alone 2. What's more, Cloud Twilight couldn't even stand steadily. His dodging and counterattacking were all a mess. He knew that he was in big trouble, but he was powerless. In the end, he turned into a ball of white light. After dying and reviving, Cloud Twilight's drunkenness was completely cleared. However, this method of sobering up was a bit too extravagant. Yin Zhongmu was naturally furious. He didn't even know what kind of person this peerless genius was, and yet he was killed for no reason. After Cloud Morning announced that he had been plotted against in the guild channel, he was unexpectedly met with a wave of laughter. Everyone laughed at Cloud Morning's drunken joke, saying that it was very tasteless, very lacking in skill, and very brainless. Cloud Twilight didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He solemnly repeated his words several times, but the guild members were all in a half-drunk, half-sober state. They didn't believe him no matter what. Eventually, there was a sober and attentive person who discovered that Cloud Twilight's level on the guild list had dropped by a level. Only then did everyone believe him. They began to ask who did it. Unrivaled genius? Who is this? After asking, everyone was at a loss. The players didn't know what the idea of the boss of Image Workshop was. The reason why they were able to ambush Unrivaled Genius was because they had obtained the information from others. Even though they didn't know who Unrivaled Genius was, Cloud Twilight knew who the guild had offended the most. With his clear-headed mind, he quickly realized that this might be the punishment that Ink Studio was trying to use force against him. Cloud Twilight looked down on the people from the Image Workshop from the bottom of his heart. Those people only knew how to amass money. Did they understand the joy of the game? Those two assassins seemed to have good skills and equipment. They were most likely fugitives hired by Image Workshop. If they wanted to use such a method to scare him, they were looking down on him too much. Cloud Twilight was very heroic. He guessed that since the other party wanted to take revenge on him, there might be people lying in wait outside the Thief Union. Cloud Twilight didn't dodge. He directly stepped out of the revival point and cursed. "Where's the grandson that wants to ambush me? Get the hell out here." "Behind you." Cloud Twilight only heard a sinister voice from behind him. Following that, someone pushed him. Cloud Twilight fell forward and immediately took a few steps away from the revival point. The experienced Cloud Twilight didn't immediately turn around to look. Instead, he immediately dodged. He rolled on the ground, only to see flames, arrows, swords, and everything else flying towards him. None of them seemed weak. Cloud Twilight dodged in time, but he was still injured. Just by looking at this wave of attacks, he could tell that the other party's coordination was very good. It was clear that they were often together. This assassin team that Image Workshop had hired was actually quite difficult to deal with. As Cloud Twilight thought about this, the other party's second wave of attacks arrived. A few mages blasted out AoE spells. They didn't directly attack Cloud Twilight, but rather restricted his movements. Taking advantage of the gaps between the spells, the other party's melee professions had already rushed in. In the blink of an eye, Cloud Twilight was completely surrounded. They're not ordinary experts. Cloud Twilight was shocked. This coordination was extremely experienced. Their control over their skills was also extremely high. Cloud Twilight, who had fought in hundreds of battles, couldn't dodge. In the blink of an eye, he died again. Cloud Twilight, who had died a second time, was surprisingly calm. The opponent wasn't simple. They attacked decisively and killed in one hit. Cloud Twilight quietly thought about the first time he died. If he hadn't been drunk at the time, would he have been able to stop those two assassins from attacking him? Those two people, either one of them was no weaker than him. If the two of them worked together, Cloud Twilight felt that he definitely wouldn't be able to defeat them. Whether or not he could escape would depend on whose equipment and movement speed was faster. Cloud Twilight hurriedly rushed to the revival point's entrance. This time, he didn't dare to casually step out. The assassins weren't in a hurry to leave either. They didn't even wear masks. They calmly revealed their true faces. Seeing Cloud Twilight rush to the entrance, one of the other party's members smiled. "You better be careful. We haven't finished greeting you yet." After saying this, he actually led the others away. He completely ignored Cloud Twilight's roar of "Who are you?" Cloud Twilight was sullen. He wanted to rush out and fight to the death with these people, but he knew that he was alone. There was no way he could be a match for such a well-coordinated team. Cloud Twilight counted the number of people on the other side. There were a total of 9 people surrounding him. For mages, 2 assassins, 1 grandmaster of combat, 1 warrior and 1 knight. This was clearly an irregular team with extremely high attack power. They didn't even bring a cleric, which was a necessity for a team. This made Cloud Twilight even more furious. This meant that the other side had complete confidence in Cloud Twilight. They believed that they wouldn't suffer any damage. Of course, there was no need to bring a cleric. At this time, they seemed to know that Cloud Twilight wouldn't rush out of the revival point. They might as well just leave. But when would this group of people appear again? Cloud Twilight obviously didn't know. He suddenly felt a chill in his heart. He realized that he was already a prey that had been targeted. What should he do in the future? Of course, he wouldn't be able to withstand this group's sneak attack alone. Bring a team? The other side had already formed a team. Even if he formed a small team, with the same number of people, Cloud Twilight felt that it would still be difficult. Would he have to go out with dozens of people in the future? How could that be possible? Cloud Twilight stayed in the revival point in pain until many of his brothers from the 10 Guilds Alliance rushed over. Cloud Twilight had already lost 2 levels. He had suffered heavy losses. A group of people had already started cursing on Cloud Twilight's behalf. However, Cloud Twilight's expression was solemn. He didn't know anything about this group of people. He didn't know how to deal with them. Today, they had ambushed him. What about tomorrow? Would they attack the other members of the 10 Guilds Alliance? If the other side had the patience to continue like this, it would be very scary. Outside Moonlit Night City, Matchless Genius was casually killing monsters to level up. A group of people came from the direction of the main city, and finally arrived in front of Matchless Genius. The group included the 2 assassins who had killed Cloud Twilight, and the 9 people who had been waiting outside the revival point. However, there were a total of 24 people. "You're here." Matchless Genius saw the group, and said while killing monsters. "Yes." The one who replied to Matchless Genius was a knight. As he replied, he gestured to the other players. The group immediately spread out and hunted monsters. However, every time a monster had 1 hit left, they would lure it to Matchless Genius. Matchless Genius was very used to killing these monsters one by one. 5 Knights' guess was basically correct. Matchless Genius really did have a group of people who played the game with him. He was also a money warrior, but he was different from Slender Waist Dance. Slender Waist Dance was an extremely personal hero. She spent all of her money on equipping herself. Her desire for the game was the same as most normal players. She wanted to become a super invincible tyrant who could destroy a main city with a single stretch of her back and a stomp of her foot. She wanted to be a super invincible tyrant who could destroy a main city. Matchless Genius, on the other hand, had a group of people who served him. When he was leveling up, they would bring the monsters that were on the verge of death to him, so that he could efficiently gain experience. When he was doing quests, there would be people who would scout ahead for him and choose the most valuable quests. His subordinates would also arrange everything for him to do along the way. It was through this method that Matchless Hero could level up at such an extraordinary speed. His own gaming skills, however, were not that great. However, Matchless Genius didn't care about this. Whenever he caused trouble in the game, he would naturally send his subordinates to clean up the mess. This was their job. Matchless Genius provided them with a place to play the game, and gave them a monthly salary. Their job was to serve Matchless Genius in the game. 5 Knights, and the others were earning money for Matchless Genius. These people could be considered as Matchless Genius's customers. In return, they mainly rewarded Matchless Genius with spiritual enjoyment. In fact, these people were quite famous. If Yin Zhongmu knew their IDs, he would realize that they were all at the top of the level leaderboards. This was also a genuine elite group. In the game's southeast region, it was easy to find out the name of their mercenary group, Eagle Group. On the way here, we killed Yin Zhongmu twice. The knight reported to Matchless Genius while commanding the others to help the boss lure monsters. "Good job, Everlasting," Matchless Genius said. If Yin Zhongmu heard this name, even if he didn't know who it was, he would definitely recognize it. The parallel world's #1 knight, Everlasting. After the city war, even the 5 roaches on the leaderboards were reshuffled. However, Everlasting's position didn't change. He was just like his ID. Ever since he became #1 on the knight leaderboards, he never gave any other knights a chance. Of course, for the players in Cloud City's Moonlit Night City, these were all unfamiliar experts. Moreover, the most terrifying expert in the game, Qianli, would appear whenever he was drunk. In front of him, the glory of any expert would seem insignificant. Everlasting only smiled at the boss's praise and continued to ask, "Are there any other targets?" "For now, let's choose Yin Zhongmu as our main target," Matchless Genius said. "How many should we kill? The lower the better," Matchless Genius said. "Understood." Everlasting wasn't surprised. This wasn't the first time they had killed someone to level 10. Matchless Hero looked at the players who had spread out to aggro the monsters. "Not everyone's here yet?" he asked after a quick count. Yeah, there are 6 people in the third group who are sleeping right now. I've already told them to clean up, and they'll be here soon, Everlasting said. Their Eagle group had a total of 30 people. They were split into 3 groups, and each group had to play for 8 hours a day. The 3 groups rotated, ensuring that Matchless Genius would have people around 24 hours a day. Matchless Genius didn't play for a fixed amount of time each day. Some were long, some were short, and some were absent. The members of the Eagle group were actually quite free most of the time. However, to them, the game wasn't just their job, it was also their fun. They were different from Five Nights and the other employees. They were more like Southbound Sword's group of 7, but they were a group of professional players with a fixed boss, while Southbound Sword's group were freelance workers. Yeah, killing Yun Jongmu seems pretty easy for you guys, but you still have to be careful of one person. Matchless Genius said. Are you talking about Qianli's drunk? Everlasting asked. That's right, it's him. This battle will most likely involve him as well, Matchless Genius said. If this person is involved, then there might be other people involved as well. It feels like a gathering of old friends. Everlasting suddenly laughed. Chapter 826. Yin Zhongmu was very anxious. Together with a large group of brothers, he finally left the resurrection point, but he was a little nervous along the way. How many people were there? Were the 10 or so people that came out one after the other their full strength? Or was it another big guild with thousands of people? Yin Zhongmu asked his brothers if they saw any unfamiliar faces, but they were all very confused. They saw unfamiliar faces every day. The game's main city wasn't as big as a city in real life, but the population had grown to hundreds of thousands. Anyone who could remember the familiar faces of hundreds of thousands of people was too powerful. Therefore, Yin Zhongmu's question didn't fit the current trend of the game. This kind of opponent was the most annoying. Yin Zhongmu didn't even know if the opponent was watching his movements in the dark or waiting for an opening to attack. Moreover, the opponent might not only be watching him, but also many people in the guild. Therefore, Yin Zhongmu seriously announced in the guild that they had to be careful in the next few days. It was best to move as a group, and not leave the revival point without 30 to 50 people. The people from the 10 Societies Alliance were in an uproar. Zhu Xian took the lead and shouted, "Where did these bastards come from? If I find out, I'll kill them with my axe." "You idiot, shut up." Yin Zhongmu didn't even have the mood to scold Zhu Xian. He continued to explain the situation seriously. "It's scary not knowing the opponent's background, but I'm sure that the 11 people I've met so far are all top experts." Zhu Xian said happily, "Old Yin, don't say that they're top experts just because you got killed twice. It's not embarrassing to be killed by 9 people. As for the 2 of them, you drank too much. It was an accident." "Zhu Xian, you bastard. If you keep talking nonsense, I'll kill you immediately." Yin Zhongmu was furious at Zhu Xian's words. Zhu Xian realized that Yin Zhongmu was serious and wasn't trying to get back at him. He quickly shut his mouth. At this time, the serious people started to express their opinions. So many top experts? How can there be so many experts in the game? Does this mean that these people are from the outer city? That should be the case. It's impossible for there to be hidden experts in Moonlit Night City that we don't know about. This group of people must be from the outer city, but we don't know where to start investigating. In short, everyone must be on guard. The 10 Society Alliance had just won a great victory and their morale was high, but in the blink of an eye, they had fallen to the bottom again. Yin Zhongmu also felt very uncomfortable. The other party was an elite team, so using elites to deal with elites was the best method. However, even though the 10 Guild Alliance was large, Cloud Twilight felt that the quality of their elite experts couldn't compare to this group of people who had ambushed them. And the most elite team he knew was obviously Qianli's group of people. However, Yin Zhongmu was someone who cared about his reputation. Currently, he led the 10 Guilds Alliance, and was known as the strongest guild in the parallel world. Yet, he still had to seek help from others for a problem that he could not handle. Just as he was hesitating over this matter, Qianli's drunk went dark in his friend list. This was a sign that he had gone offline. Many things had happened today. Gu Fei had been online for countless hours. It was comparable to the time he had spent in the city war. Now that he had completed a few bounty quests and nothing else had happened, he logged off to rest. When Gu Fei went offline, the players didn't say anything, but the staff behind the monitor let out a long sigh of relief. In Cloud City, the OP market was still very popular. The promotional work was almost done. Now the focus was on collecting and selecting resumes. Once they were selected, they would go on to interview. For these two matters, they had even chosen to set up their residences in 2 different districts. There was nothing they could do about it, as they were incredibly overpowered. Even though they had only used 2 residences, it was already more ostentatious than any other guild out there. Even the number 1 guild in Cloud City, unhindered, only had a single property. The selected players had to go to 2 places, but they didn't find it troublesome at all. This was already enough to make them excited. However, the guild leader, Sword Demon, was still in jail and couldn't do anything. At the moment, OP had no other position other than the guild leader. Although the Han family young master and a few other elite squad members were commanding this and that, and the players obeyed them, the system obviously didn't recognize them. OP's authority was currently concentrated in the guild leader's hands. Therefore, the selected players couldn't join the guild for the time being. Therefore, Mr. Han slyly replied to all the players who had been interviewed that they would be waiting for further notice. In fact, they already knew which of these people were the most outstanding. However, since the Sword Ghost was not going to appear for the time being, and they could not add more people, they might as well continue sifting through them first. After all, there was no such thing as the best, only the better. Of course, the Han family young master, and the others weren't Iron Men who didn't need to sleep. They just didn't deliberately control the game time like Gu Fei. These guys were busy until the morning, and then they went offline to rest. Large advertisements were posted on the entrance of each station, asking players who still wanted to sign up to send their resumes to Brother Yu's mailbox. Yintung Studios' swift and decisive headhunting operation was extremely effective. At dawn, 8 out of 11 directors of Yingqi Studio had signed a contract with Yintung Studio. 2 of them asked for 3 days to consider, and the last one was directly eliminated, 5 nights. As for the second-tier city leaders, half of them had been headhunted in 1 night. These people were easier to deal with than the directors. As soon as they changed hands, they were assigned work. Under the leadership of the senior employees of Yintung Studio, they began to conduct detailed statistics on the leveling areas in the main cities in preparation for the efficient leveling method. Both Cloud Peak and Moonlit Night City seemed to have returned to peace. After this war, many players had lost levels. The bigger the guild, the heavier the losses. During the battle, they didn't care about the gains and losses. However, after the hot-bloodedness, everyone was heartbroken and cried. Everyone began to deliberately avoid conflicts. Even the players in Moonlit Night City didn't seem so impulsive. Everyone diligently leveled up, trying to make up for their losses as soon as possible. When everyone came online the next day, it felt like a long time had passed. Everything that happened the day before was like a nightmare. The only thing that didn't change was that Sword Demon was still in prison. Even if he didn't sleep, he would have to sit for more than 10 hours a day in prison for 42 hours. Sword Demon wouldn't be able to come out for at least 2 or 3 days. He was accompanied by a fierce person like 100 Lives Jinglin. At this moment, apart from the 2 brothers, there was also the mage, Huorunni, who had been bombarding the other day and had a high PK value. Apart from the 3 of them, everyone else had been released successfully. The 3 of them now had a single room each. 2 sides were very lonely, while the other side was in full swing. Although 100 Lives Jinglin hadn't been released, he had already begun to guide the work of the studio outside. Nitrite Radical would constantly send people to understand what he needed to develop the leveling efficiency method. Whenever he thought of something, they would send someone over. Throughout the day, they would come in and out. Even 100 Generations Jingshi's heart ached for the prison visitation fee. At this moment, Nitrite Root personally came and brought some information about the leveling areas that he had sorted out the night before. While 100 Lives Jinglin was still in prison, he wanted to familiarize himself with the place and kill time. As for Huorunni and Sword Demon, Nitrite Root knew that they were very overpowered as well, especially since one of them was an overpowered boss. He didn't dare to be negligent, so he had to ask about their well-being. Even though it was just some nonsense like whether it was cold in prison, whether it was gloomy, whether it was lonely, and so on. Gu Fei had been online for a long time yesterday. According to his habit, he would restrain himself for the next few days to adjust his body, so he didn't show up for the entire day. However, since there was no battle, no one cared whether he came or not. The extremely overpowered recruitment work continued. Han family young master, Brother Yu, and the other experts in the elite group were envious of the players' resumes, and there were many arguments in order to select the players. However, this was all just a small quarrel. At this moment, Cloud Twilight was truly in deep trouble. During the night, the 10 Guilds Alliance was not attacked at all. Although everyone listened to Cloud Twilight's orders and occupied the leveling areas to level up, they didn't find anything suspicious. After the night passed, everyone naturally relaxed a little. After the sky turned bright, the all-nighters all returned to the city to rest. It was a peaceful journey. However, at this moment, the Eagle Group's crusade officially began. They saw that most of the 10 Guilds Alliance players had gone offline to rest, and immediately began to hunt down the 10 Guilds Alliance players in the city. They didn't form groups, nor did they guard any resurrection points. They just wandered around the city randomly. The 10 Guilds Alliance players who woke up early were all in trouble. Some of these players weren't around the night before, so they naturally didn't know about the latest situation. Although Cloud Twilight ordered the guilds to leave an announcement, they still had to choose a place to gather. Hence, the 10 Guilds Alliance players were killed on the streets outside the resurrection points. Those who attacked them were all experts, and they managed to escape unscathed. When they called for their brothers and rushed over, there wasn't even a trace of them. Some cleverly thought that the other party would wait outside the resurrection point, so they purposely gathered their people and tried to lure them out. In the end, no one cared about them at all. The situation only changed after the players formed a crowd at the resurrection point. The killers didn't wander around the streets outside the resurrection point anymore. They suddenly gathered at one point and annihilated a group of 10 Guilds Alliance players outside the Mage Academy. The 10 Guilds Alliance players were terrified. The guild leader left an announcement for everyone to form groups of 30 to 50 people. There were 34 mages who gathered at the entrance of the Mage Academy, but after fighting with the other party, they didn't even manage to kill a single one of them. The mages who resurrected near the resurrection point could only watch helplessly as the opposing team swaggered off. According to the mages who took note of the other party's numbers, there were 20 of them. These 20 people were the two groups of Eagle Group. Forever's decision was to attack the 10 Guilds Alliance non-stop for 24 hours. This was just the beginning, so the attack was slightly more intense. The original 8 hours per group was changed to 16 hours per day. This way, there would be 2 groups online every 24 hours. For these madmen who loved games, playing for 16 hours a day was nothing. Even if it wasn't a job requirement, they often played like this. Although they were called to work for 8 hours this time, after Matchless Genius promised to work overtime, they didn't say anything else. Wasn't it just PK? There weren't many experts who didn't like PK. This was much more fun than helping the boss get experience. Everyone excitedly started working. For the entire morning, the 10 Guilds Alliance players were either scattered or regrouped. They were constantly being attacked. They didn't even know how many people the other party had. Every battle ended so quickly that they didn't even have time to see the other party's face before they were killed. It wasn't until the afternoon that Cloud Twilight logged back online. The guild was already in a state of tears. The players reported the situation to Cloud Twilight. They strongly pointed out one thing. A group of 30 to 50 people was still in danger. In the morning, a group of 50 people had been ambushed by the enemy. Of the 50 people, 41 were killed, and only 9 managed to escape. What was even more terrifying was that the 10 Guilds Alliance had been attacked countless times in the morning. Sometimes the other party had more people than them, but more often than not, they had more people than them. Top experts. At this time, no one had any doubts about Cloud Twilight's conclusion. What about information? So many people died. Don't tell me we didn't get any information about them? Cloud Twilight asked. Boss, I tried to appraise them, but I failed. The other party's level is too high. A level 40 player replied to Cloud Twilight. Nonsense. Of course you failed. How can an expert be lower than level 42? Cloud Twilight said. I appraised one person. A cleric said. Boss, I'll post it. After saying this, the cleric posted the records of the equipment he had appraised in the morning. It was a warrior with 9 pieces of equipment. The cleric had only appraised 5 pieces of equipment. All of them were top-notch. The players of the 10 Guilds Alliance were silent. Just this one person? Cloud Twilight said. I only had time to appraise him and then I died. The cleric was depressed. If he died, he would lose a level. After losing a level, there was no need to talk about appraising. However, the cleric wasn't the only one who knew about the appraisal. A few other players also provided their own appraisal results. In the end, there were a total of 7 people who had appraised their equipment. Not a single one of their equipment was mediocre. Often there were some top-notch equipment. What do you guys think? Cloud Twilight asked. Experts. Nonsense. Cloud Twilight hated talking nonsense. I'm asking if we can tell where these people are from their equipment. There was silence. Fuck, write it all down. Post it on the forums. Cloud Twilight said. With the boss's order, the players immediately went to do it. At this time, there was news of being attacked. As soon as the players came online, they naturally went out from the revival point and forgot about the guild's new announcement. As a result, not long after they left the streets, they were killed. They were stabbed from behind, and not many people knew who the murderer was. Fuck everyone, look at the guild announcement. Don't move alone. Don't move alone. Every death felt like a slap to Cloud Twilight's face. Even if he killed himself, he wouldn't feel this much pain. This feeling of helplessness was something Cloud Twilight hated. We need to think of a way to lure them out. We tried this morning, but they didn't fall for it. I feel like they've been watching us from the shadows. The player who said this couldn't help but look left and right. Form a group of people to act as bait. Arrange a few others to temporarily remove the guild emblem. When the enemy makes their move, we'll appear together and kill them all in one fell swoop. Cloud Twilight said. We tried this too, but... One of them hesitated. But what? Cloud Twilight asked. They appeared and wiped out the bait group. Then they broke out of the encirclement. The faster brothers chased after them, but they turned around and killed them. This is on purpose. They purposely charged out knowing that there was a trap. This was a risk to establish their might, Cloud Twilight said. But I don't understand how they let them escape. There's bound to be someone who's slower. The main force can just attack together. Another player said. There's a difference in equipment. Cloud Twilight was calm. If we're talking about overall speed, we're not as fast as them. Small groups of players won't be able to intercept them. Then what should we do? Everyone started to give Cloud Twilight a test. How many people surrounded us at the time? Cloud Twilight asked. Around 100. Change the announcement. Move with a team of at least 100 people. Cloud Twilight said. Since the enemy chose to break out of the encirclement, it means that they won't be able to face 100 people head-on. A team of 100 people should be able to protect themselves. Oldian, we can't continue to be so passive. We have to think of a way to take the initiative. Someone said. I know, but we have to at least figure out the enemy's strength. Cloud Twilight said. Damn it, this is so frustrating. A mage gloomily shouted. Suddenly, there was a sound. A whistling arrow came from 60 meters away. The arrow pierced through the mage's head. A white light flashed, and the mage was instantly killed. Everyone was shocked. They looked towards where the arrow came from. That person was actually standing at the end of the street. After killing a person with one arrow, he didn't fire a second shot. He turned around and slowly left. Someone jumped up and wanted to chase after him, but Cloud Twilight shouted, No need. We won't be able to catch up. What a high attack. Someone exclaimed. Right now it was 40 domains. Even a mage with low health and defense couldn't be killed so easily. Not necessarily. It might be a critical hit or something. He just happened to be in time. If he really had such a high attack, he would have killed all of us with one arrow at a time. Cloud Twilight continued to analyze carefully. Old Yun, you're right. Many people in the guild agreed. This arrow was still to show off. It was specifically aimed at that kid who was so sullen. This is to tell us that they have a clear grasp of our situation. They definitely have people in our guild, Cloud and Twilight said. Chapter 827. The Eagle Party's strength wasn't the only thing that made them fearsome. With the support of the workshop, they had a huge financial advantage. There was no need to place these spies in advance. If they needed them, they could just bribe a few with money. This depended on the player's temperament. For a team like the 10 Meetings Alliance with more than 4,000 players, the Eagle Party should be able to bribe at least one of them. Moreover, there were many temporary workers in the 10 Meetings Alliance. Those who were still able to stay were rather sly people. Things would naturally be smoother if they could get in touch with these people. This was something that the guild couldn't prevent. Even though Yin Zhongmu knew that there was a mole in the guild, there was nothing he could do. However, Yin Zhongmu's gaze shifted. Just now, the mage had only shouted in the guild channel, and was killed by the enemy sharpshooter as a demonstration. Of course, the guild members would be able to hear his shouts through the channel. However, it was a different matter if they could clearly provide his location. From this angle, Yin Zhongmu wanted to try and determine the scope of this mole. But when he looked around, he saw that there were at least 20 to 30 people around this brave mage who could easily give him a hint. Not only that, there was no lack of good friends that Yin Zhongmu had always trusted. Suspect them? Yin Zhongmu wasn't willing to. The players reacted differently to the conclusion that there was a mole. Some cursed in the guild channel, while others coldly observed the situation like Cloud Twilight. In short, suspicions and jealousy rose in the hearts of the players. The players who usually didn't like the look of these players now looked like traitors. Strange voices could be heard from time to time, and it didn't take long for two waves of arguments to break out. Yin Zhongmu felt a chill down his spine when he saw the situation. He had a deeper understanding of how terrifying the enemy was. First, the enemy used simple and crude methods to torment the 10 Meetings Alliance. Now they were obviously exposing the existence of a mole. The 10 Meetings Alliance, which was already in a state of panic, began to suspect each other. Moreover, the 10 Meetings Alliance couldn't catch them with their sneak attacks. This way, everyone's attention would be shifted to each other. Once they were attacked, they would suspect that someone had betrayed the team. If the team broke up, they could form another one. However, if the people's hearts were broken, then they couldn't lead the team anymore. Yin Zhongmu deeply understood this reasoning, but there was no way he could uncover a mole. This shadow would only grow larger and larger. Cloud Twilight was at his wits' end and anxious. He could only post in the guild channel that all moles were shameless paper tigers, and that there was nothing to be afraid of. Although there were many responses, Yin Zhongmu knew that it was useless to erase the shadow in everyone's hearts. Cloud Twilight even felt a bit regretful. He shouldn't have deduced that there was a traitor based on the archer's ambush. This was something that only he knew about, and he shouldn't have said it out loud. Cloud Twilight discovered that there was still a lot of room for improvement in his leadership skills. With low morale, Yin Zhongmu led the group out of the main city. Where were they going now? Cloud Twilight didn't know, and the players following him didn't ask either. Everyone just quietly followed the group. Only when they left the main city gates did Yin Zhongmu suddenly wake up. He turned around to look at his 100 or so brothers. Time to level up. Dusk in the Cloud waved his arm, looking very spirited. He had to bury his gloomy mood deep down. Although he felt that the enemy was becoming more and more terrifying, he still had to look down on them. Yin Zhongmu didn't seem to care about the enemy's ambush at all. This really made the players in the group more spirited. The journey was uneventful. This group of more than 100 players arrived at the leveling area. Yin Zhongmu carefully arranged the formation, telling everyone not to split up too much. They had to be prepared to fight at any time. Naturally, there were still players from the 10 Guild Alliance coming online. After seeing the guild announcement and hearing about the tragedy that had happened all morning, everyone was very cautious. They formed groups at the resurrection point and were determined not to go out with less than 100 players. However, the opponents were very patient and determined. They continued to wait quietly in the streets and alleys near the resurrection point. If any of the players from the 10 Guild Alliance were to be careless, they would immediately be ambushed. However, compared to the situation in the morning, the situation was much better. Even so, some people in the guild couldn't help but say to Dusk in the Cloud, "Boss, how about we don't wear the guild emblem for now?" The guild emblem of the 10 Guild Alliance was the symbol of Moonlit Night City's dominance, but now, they had to hide it in the face of pressure. Naturally, Dusk was very angry. How could Yin Zhongmu not have thought of such a simple method? However, hiding it wasn't to his liking. It wasn't to Dusk's liking, and of course, it wasn't to the liking of his friends. Before Dusk could say anything, one of his friends yelled, "What are you afraid of? I'm wearing it. If they have the guts, come and kill us all." It was rare for Yin Zhongmu to laugh sincerely for once. No matter what, he would always have a group of brothers who would advance and retreat with him. This was what made him the happiest. When he thought about how even if they lost levels, they would all lose together. Even if the guild was disbanded, the hearts of his brothers would never fade away. Dusk felt that the expert elite group was just bullshit. He immediately laughed in the chat. "That's right, these bastards are just sneaky. Everyone, be careful and don't go out unless there are 100 of us. 100 of us will level, 100 of us will do quests, and 100 of us will set up stalls on the streets. We won't give them any opportunities. Let's see how long these clowns can last." Dusk's speech this time was quite encouraging, and the guild channel was filled with cheers. The guild members could also look out for each other. If they discovered a new guild friend, they would immediately notify them. After all, not many players had the habit of looking at the guild announcement as soon as they logged on. The players who went to the forums to ask for information had already returned. They directly sent a private message to Dusk in the Cloud, "Boss, I'm back. How did it go?" Dusk knew that it wouldn't be difficult to find out. If it was just one or two pieces of exquisite equipment, it naturally wouldn't represent their identity. However, when a few pieces of exquisite equipment were put together, the scope would be reduced by a lot. Moreover, these guys were very skilled in the game, and their cooperation was very good. With such outstanding equipment, it was impossible for them to be unknown in the game. Could it be that a team of experts suddenly fell from the sky and caused trouble for the 10 Guilds Alliance? Didn't we appraise 8 sets of equipment? 3 of them were definitely identified by the replies below. We didn't appraise the other 2 sets completely, and the replies were also guessing. There are still 3 sets that were ignored. Who are the 3 confirmed? Dusk in the Cloud asked. Warriors Maple Blood, Thieves 8 West 3, Fighters Every Punch to the Flesh. The subordinate replied quickly. They really are experts. Dusk in the Cloud was amazed. Since he was once one of the top 5, Dusk in the Cloud had the pleasure of flipping through the experience leaderboard. The 3 names mentioned seemed familiar to Dusk in the Cloud, and he was sure that he had definitely seen them at the top of the leaderboard. The player who went to the forums immediately replied, "Yes, I went to check the experience leaderboard. Maple Blood is currently ranked 19th for Warriors, 8 West 3 is ranked 14th for Thieves, and Every Punch to the Flesh is ranked 8th for Fighters." The experience leaderboard was the overall ranking of the tens of millions of players in the game. The top 5, top 10, top 7, and casual players that the players were talking about were actually only a few dozen people. On these leaderboards, not to mention the top 10 and top 100, even the top 1000 were definitely extraordinary gaming fanatics. Other than people like Gu Fei, who was super technical, or people like Matchless Genius, who was willing to throw money at them, normal players wouldn't be able to get so much experience if they didn't spend a lot of time in the game. Of course, there were experts in the 10 Guilds Alliance, but based on the experience leaderboard, the 10 Guilds Alliance was clearly inferior in terms of the quality of experts. The experts that came were among the best in the entire game, but what about the 10 Guilds Alliance? They were among the best in Moonlit Night City, but in the entire game, they were in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th digits. Although they were quite impressive among the tens of millions of people, they were still a little lacking. And the two that you mentioned, who are they? Yin Zhongmu continued to ask. One is Flute, who is ranked 13th on the Knight leaderboard, and the other is Eagle, who is ranked 8th on the Thief leaderboard. Damn it. Are the others also as powerful as him? They don't look like they gathered together at the last minute. Where did so many experts come from? Yin Zhongmu didn't understand. Could it be that one of the 100 main cities in the game had good water and soil? And the monsters that they raised were richer than the other main cities. And so they raised such experts? There should be a limit even for elite teams. Now, out of the 8 of them, after smashing 5 bricks, 2 of them were in the top 10, and the other 3 were also in the top 20. The other 3 were unknown. And it was unknown whether they would be able to get into the top 100 or more. Guildmaster, someone on the forums mentioned where these people came from. Fuck, why didn't you say so earlier? Yin Zhongmu roared. They're a mercenary group called the Eagle Group. It was founded by Eagle, and that's how they got their name. However, the current leader is the first knight, Eternal. Eternal. Anyone would have a deep impression of a character whose name was at the top of the leaderboard. Of course, Yin Zhongmu knew of such a majestic figure on the Knight leaderboard. However, there were many big cities in the parallel world, and many experts were only heard of, but never seen. There was no cheap teleportation function in the game, and everyone lived their lives in their own main cities. They never had the chance to see the world. For example, Reigning the 4 Seas and the others had visited 5 to 6 main cities after a single quest. This kind of experience was rare among players. Is there any other news about this Eagle group? Yin Zhongmu calmed himself down and continued to understand the situation. I heard that there are 30 people in this group, and they're all experts on the leaderboard. They're the real deal. And they're the real deal. Their activity isn't limited to a single main city, and they're no strangers to the players in the southeast region of the parallel world. They've been hired to complete quite a few extremely difficult quests, and they're quite famous in the southeast region. Where are we on the world map? Yin Zhongmu suddenly thought of this question. Southwest. I heard that Cloud City is the main city in the southwest. This player seemed to have some understanding of the world. One in the west, one in the east. We've always minded our own business, but now that they've come to cause trouble, it seems like they've been bribed by Ying Qi. They're quite brave to make a move against the 10 Guilds Alliance. Go and find out more information about the Eagle Group. Since they're so famous, it shouldn't be hard to dig up information on all 30 of them, right? Yin Zhongmu said. An unknown enemy was always scarier. Yin Zhongmu's nervousness finally calmed down a little when he understood the enemy's background, especially when he knew that they were just a mercenary group of 30 people. The 10 Guilds Alliance had 4,000 players, and even the elites of a 30-man party were no match for them. Of course, the enemy wouldn't use a direct confrontation strategy, so they could only target lone players like they did today. They didn't dare to fight against a 100-man party. The player immediately went offline after hearing the command, and went to the forums to find out more about the Eagle Group. Yin Zhongmu was giving a morale-boosting speech in the guild chat. Comrades, we've already figured out the enemy's background. It's a mercenary group of 30 people from the southeast region, called the Eagle Group. I heard that they're quite famous in the southeast region, and they're all top-notch experts. We're going to let them know that in our southwest region, in our Moonlit Night City's territory, they're nothing. Not even a feather, not even a feather. The guild was filled with boorish cries. Just when everyone thought Yin Zhongmu was going to say something exciting, his speech was already over, and he only said one sentence in the end. All right, let's continue with what we were doing. Some couldn't hold it in any longer, and messaged Yin Zhongmu, asking for their next step. Find out more about them. This was Yin Zhongmu's reply. The moonlit street of Moonlit Night City was a place where players set up stalls and traded. This street led straight to the central plaza of the main city, and was wide and spacious. Both sides of the street were filled with players setting up stalls, stretching as far as the eye could see. Moonlit Night City had just finished a major battle, and the previously lifeless market due to the currency adjustment was now bustling with activity. Now that he knew the value of gold coins, he had to buy some equipment to protect himself no matter what, since he was already naked. The moonlit street was bustling with people, and the sounds of bargaining could be heard everywhere. This was the biggest difference from the system auction house, where buyers and sellers traded face to face, and there was a lot of room for negotiation. At this moment, there was a 100-man party from the 10 Guilds Alliance, and they were majestically strolling down the street. These people had lost some equipment in the previous city war, and they obviously had to make up for it now. They obeyed the guild leader's orders, and even formed a 100-man party. As soon as they entered the street, many of the players were so shocked that they prepared to close up their stalls. They were from the 10 Guilds Alliance. Why did they suddenly gather so many people, apart from PvP? It was just that they didn't know which guild was going to be in trouble. Of course, the players of the 10 Guilds Alliance were used to being arrogant. Even though they were forced to form an alliance, and it was a little embarrassing to say it out loud, just the aura of the alliance was enough to scare a considerable number of players to the ground. A warrior laughed as he walked to a small stall, pointed at an iron belt, and asked for the price. The stall owner was stunned for a moment before answering. Hence, the bargaining seemed no different from a normal transaction. At the same time, the people from the 10 Guilds Alliance also scattered and began to sweep up the stalls. And when they saw something they liked, they went up to talk to the stall owner. The players finally understood that the 10 Guilds Alliance was here to purchase. However, was there a need to make such a big scene when it came to purchasing? The puzzled players soon knew the answer, because within a moment, another group of people appeared at the end of the street. It was a neat group of 30 people, and each of them had equipment that more or less exuded an unusual brilliance. The most interesting thing in the trading street was equipment, so a large number of players appraised this group of people. And in the end, most of them were defeated. Their levels were insufficient. Of course, they were experts with high levels and good equipment, and there were a total of 30 experts. The moment the 30 experts stepped into Moonlight Street, many people in the group suddenly became busy. Rays of light appeared one after another, and the 30 people began to buff each other. Some of the skills and spells were unknown to the players present. However, they at least knew one thing. The 10 Guilds Alliance was considered to be the first to form a group to shop, but if a group of people had to buff each other, they couldn't naively think that they were here to shop. The tactful players had already slipped away quietly, and countless players who set up stalls began to roll up their bags. There were too many players on the street who noticed this scene, including the people from the 10 Guilds Alliance. However, compared to others, they were more aware of these people's intentions. It's the Eagle Party in the trading street. It's the Eagle Party in the trading street. Someone hurriedly sent out a message. Needless to say, this group of people in front of them was the Eagle Party, because it was impossible to gather such an eye-catching group in Moonlight City. The person in front of the 30 people was a paladin, and just when everyone thought he was going to say something, he suddenly drew his sword and pointed, and only said one word: charge. The 100 people from the 10 Guilds Alliance had already scattered after entering the trading street. At this moment, there were still 2/3 of the people who were unaware that the Eagle Party had already set their eyes on them. They had only found out from the guild channel that the Eagle Party was attacking them in Moonlight Street. The resistance formed by a few stragglers did not seem to have any effect at all. The Eagle group swept past them, leaving white light behind. Moonlight Street was in chaos. Fortunately, the players of Moonlight City were very experienced in PvP, and when they saw that it was a battle that did not concern them, they wisely squeezed to the sides of the street, leaving the space in the middle for the people who wanted to fight. Return to the group. All of you, return to the group. The leader of the shopping group shouted anxiously at the scattered players. Chapter 828. The players from the 10 Guilds Alliance, who had rushed over in a hurry, were no match for the Eagle Legion. They had no positioning, and their attacks weren't coordinated. All they could do was rush over as fast as they could, and then hurriedly cast their skills as soon as they were within attack range. Then, they saw the Eagle Legion taking the brunt of his skills and pouncing on him, knocking him to the ground. In this chaotic situation, he didn't even know who he had contributed his PK points to. A warrior tried to use Charge and Whirlwind Slash to disrupt the opponent's formation. In the end, When he activated charge, a warrior in the opponent's formation also stepped forward and used charge to resist. After the system judgment, the poor warrior of the 10 Meetings Alliance was kite like a kite. Everyone was naturally shocked. After the judgment, the party with the higher attack had the upper hand, but the damage of the party with the lower attack was not negligible. At this time, the party that collided with the warrior was actually sent flying by the charge. It was as if he did not attack at all. This could only mean that the difference in damage between the two charges was too great. In the end, after the warrior of the Eagle party used charge, he suddenly flew into the air with his swords in both hands, paused for a moment, and then quickly fell into the 10 Meetings Alliance's formation. 2 streaks of sword light cut through the formation, and the ground trembled. Players with enough PK points could appreciate this skill from the pursuing system guards. Earth-shattering slash. Not only did this skill deal AoE damage, but it also had a chance to stun. However, the chance was not high, and the players around the warrior were obviously still controlling themselves. But before they could react, the warrior had already swung his 2 swords and swept up a huge whirlwind slash in their formation. Under the sword light, white light danced. The players of the Eagle party very tacitly split into 2 and went around the range of the warrior's whirlwind slash from the left and right sides. The players who did not die under the whirlwind slash were killed by them, and then regrouped at the other end of the team, and continued to kill the 10 Meetings Alliance players. The players of the 10 Meetings Alliance had finally gathered, but they could not hold their ground. The Eagle party's ambush had wiped out 37 of their members. Including their party leader, the remaining 63 members were like headless flies. They were no different from NPC monsters. The only smart thing was that when they realized that the situation wasn't looking good, some of them decided to run without hesitation. Of course, the warriors and priests knew that the ones running away were either thieves or archers. They expressed their heroic spirit that they would rather die than cower in the face of danger. Hold on, brothers. I'm going to call for reinforcements. Good brother, when it comes to asking for reinforcements, just send a message. We will advance and retreat together here. Such touching conversations were not uncommon. It could be seen that even the hot-blooded and heroic Moonlit Night City had some wretched existences. The call for help had been sent out a long time ago, and Yin Zhongmu had already led his troops back. But when he arrived at Moon Street, everything was over. This was just an online game. There wouldn't be blood on the ground, nor would there be corpses. There would only be peace. But for the largest market street in Moonlit Night City, silence was the scariest atmosphere. In front of everyone's eyes, not a single person from the 10 Meetings Alliance's shopping group survived. All of them were killed by the 30-man team that suddenly appeared. The players of Moonlit Night City were quite discerning when it came to PvP. They could tell that the 30-man team was top-notch in terms of skills, equipment, coordination, and awareness. It wasn't strange to see 1 or 2 of these players, but 30 of them had appeared at the same time. Everyone was trying to guess where they came from. At this moment, the players were still standing on both sides of the street discussing amongst themselves, as if they had forgotten why they were here. Yin Zhongmu's expression was steely. He had just said in the guild chat that this was just a 30-man mercenary group. They weren't worth anything, and wouldn't dare to fight against their 100-man team. But then, Eagle's team gathered together, and annihilated the 100-man team of the 10 Meetings Alliance. Objective reasons such as the quality of their members, and the coordination of their tactics were all useless. This was a huge slap in the face to the morale that Yin Zhongmu had just said. Forever Ha. Yin Zhongmu muttered this name. Since this person was the team leader, then the strategies of Eagle's team should have been set up by him. This person clearly had a good sense of strategy. His attacks didn't just annihilate 100 people. These attacks created a huge pressure that was difficult to deal with. Those bastards from Eagle's team. They were all gone by the time I arrived, Yin Zhongmu said in the guild chat. How many people can recognize these bastards? Yin Zhongmu yelled. He decided to take the initiative. If they continued to defend passively, they would really die. Eagle's team didn't wear masks. After so many attacks, many people remembered some of their faces and spoke up in the guild chat. Alright, you guys, listen up. Take off your guild badges and walk around the city. Pay attention to the streets near the revival point. If you find any of them, send a private message to the guild leader, Yin Zhongmu instructed. Sending a private message to the guild leader was Yin Zhongmu's counter-espionage tactic. He wasn't afraid of the enemy finding out. However, whether or not he found them, he couldn't let the news leak out. The guild leaders of all 10 guilds were trustworthy people. Yin Zhongmu told them to notify the guild leader when they found them. Then they would find reliable people to organize an attack. Even killing 1 or 2 of the enemy's players was fine. That way, they wouldn't be so passive and they wouldn't be so nervous. His eyes and ears began to spread out to search for the whereabouts of Eagle's team members. Yin Zhongmu began to choose trustworthy people to fight with. The brothers who had been with him for a long time were naturally trustworthy. Yin Zhongmu even had a bit of blind trust in them. Zhu Xian, the first strategist, and the others were often scolded and looked down upon by Yin Zhongmu. However, if these people really became the enemy's spies, Yin Zhongmu wouldn't be able to scold them at all. These people were obviously added to the team by Yin Zhongmu. Then he thought of some reliable people and even sent people offline to call for reinforcements. Although Yin Zhongmu felt that there were many people he could trust, it was hard to predict a person's heart. The more people there were, the greater the risk. After gathering around 150 people, Yin Zhongmu felt that it was about time. Although the 100-man team had been badly beaten on Moonlight Street, there were many objective factors. Yin Zhongmu believed that the hot-blooded team that he personally led could rival any 30-man team in the game, apart from Qianli's drunk. Just as he was gathering his men, the spies he sent out suddenly reported back. They found Eagle's team near the Thieves' Guild. I only recognized one person, but there are 3 others with him, the spies said. What are they doing? I don't know. I think they're just walking around, the spies replied. Can you keep an eye on them? They haven't found me yet, the spies said. Okay, keep an eye on them. Be careful, we'll be there soon. Yin Zhongmu quickly gathered his men. Of course, 150 people couldn't be coincidentally in the same place, but there were only 4 of them. There was no need for 150 people. Plus, they couldn't miss this opportunity. As a result, 54 people gathered as quickly as possible and rushed towards the Thieves' Guild. They're on the 3rd street of the Thieves' Guild. They turned to the 2nd street. They turned back to the square. They entered the 4th street again. I think they're just randomly looking to see if they can bump into our people. The spies continued to report while making some analysis. Hee, they'll find them soon. Zhu Xian smiled lewdly. Following the spies' directions, they had already reached the 4th street. Describe the 4 of them, Yin Zhongmu said. 1 knight, 1 warrior, 1 thief and 1 priest, the spies replied. Oh, they don't have any long-range professions. We can easily kill them. The first-generation tactician started talking nonsense. Duan Yun, take half of your men and enter from this side. I'll take a detour and intercept them from that side. Yin Zhongmu arranged a strategy. It can't be that bad, old Yin. There's only 1 thief out of the 4. The other 3 can't run even if they want to, so why do we need to intercept them? Just send a few people to the other side. Duan Yin said. Yin Zhongmu thought about it and felt that it made sense. There really wasn't a need to split half of his men just to deal with 1 thief. As a result, he randomly picked a few thieves and archers to go around. After the arrangements were made, Yin Zhongmu waved his hand, and a group of brothers rushed into the Thieves' Guild's 4th street with murderous intent. This was just an ordinary street. There weren't too many people, but there weren't too few either. Players who liked to do business near the revival point would usually set up their stalls in the plaza outside the Thieves' Guild instead of here. This was a purely passageway. The only people coming and going were players who were in a hurry. They all rushed forward as fast as they could. Even though there were only 4 of them, Yin Zhongmu didn't let his guard down. After entering the street, he arranged for everyone to stand in formation and advance. Zhu Xian said a few words of arrogance, which naturally drew another wave of curses. The group walked along the street for nearly halfway. They gradually saw 4 players on the left side of the street, 2 in front and 2 behind. They were casually walking towards them. They were too far away and couldn't use identify, but looking at their equipment, They completely matched the 4 classes of warrior, knight, thief, and priest. Spread out a bit, spread out a bit. Walk slowly, Cloud Twilight ordered. The other side should recognize him, but Yin Zhongmu was a thief. Covering his face was both safe and reasonable, so he wasn't afraid of alerting them. As for recognizing the guild emblem, the other side clearly didn't have an archer. By the time they recognized the emblem, Yin Zhongmu and the others had already pounced on them. The street was very quiet, and the channel was also very quiet. Once the battle started, even Zhu Xian didn't dare to make any noise. Everyone left the channel to the commander, Yin Zhongmu. 50 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters, the other side was getting closer and closer. Yin Zhongmu could feel the sweat on his palms. He sneaked a glance at the brothers on his left and right. They were all walking quite casually. At this moment, they didn't seem to be in any battle formation. Unless they could recognize the guild emblem from this far away, they wouldn't be able to tell that they were on the same side. Why aren't we being more careful? Maybe we should take off the emblem. Yin Zhongmu suddenly felt very uneasy. They were facing a great enemy, but they still wanted to wear the emblem to take revenge. Wasn't that a little too childish? But if he asked everyone to take it off, wouldn't it attract attention? Yin Zhongmu was still thinking about this small detail, but they were getting closer and closer to the enemy. Finally, someone in the channel couldn't help but remind him, "Old Yin, are we attacking now? They don't seem to have noticed us. Are we waiting for them to walk into our formation, and then suddenly attack? Won't we be able to surround them that way?" Yin Zhongmu, who was walking in front, could already see the 4 faces clearly. Seeing that they didn't seem to have noticed, Yin Zhongmu suddenly felt conflicted. It's just against 4 people. Am I being a little too cautious? Yin Zhongmu had already brushed past the 4 people. He immediately had this self-mocking thought. Just as he was about to give the order to attack, he suddenly realized that in front of him, there were players coming towards him. Some were walking, some were running, and all of them were moving so naturally. They were practically the same as his group. Yin Zhongmu suddenly realized something and shouted in the channel, "Not good, we've been tricked." What? Everyone stared at the channel, and was just about to yell at Yin Zhongmu to attack, but who would have thought that Yin Zhongmu would suddenly say something like this? Immediately after, Yin Zhongmu roared again, "Kill these 4." Everyone had been waiting for these words. Even though they didn't understand why Yin Zhongmu had been tricked, they had been preparing for a long time to attack these 4 people. Yin Zhongmu's group of old friends were naturally experienced in killing people. They stood at the front and didn't rush to attack. Instead, they directly brushed past the opponents, first cutting off their path of retreat. The players behind them stood in front of them and prevented them from moving forward. The ones who were truly the main attackers were the ones furthest away from the 4 people. They were the mages and archers who had long-range attacks. There were people blocking the front and back, and the gap in the middle would be accurately attacked by the mages and archers. The only way out was to quickly clear out the players blocking them. Of course, this wasn't that easy. Yin Zhongmu's trusted friends weren't that easy to deal with. However, these 4 people didn't seem to want to do so. The cleric among the 4 suddenly raised his staff. Yin Zhongmu, who wasn't far from them, heard him shout, "Mana barrier." A wave of white light suddenly spread out, instantly condensing into a small ball with a diameter of 3 meters. The other 3 people also stood beside the cleric, and the 4 of them entered the ball of light. The heavenly fire wheel descended, but was blocked outside the ball of light. The flaming 3,000 layers flame rose from the ground, but was also blocked outside the 3-meter diameter. Only the arrows of the archers seemed to have encountered nothing. They directly passed through the ball of light and struck the 4 people. However, the warrior immediately raised his shield and blocked all the arrows. This mana barrier was clearly ineffective against physical attacks. Moreover, after this wave of magic attacks, the light of the ball of light dimmed a lot. At this moment, the cleric was still holding his staff without moving. It was clear that this was a spell that needed to be maintained for a long period of time. "Continue attacking," Yin Zhongmu roared. He estimated that this spell wouldn't last for long. "I didn't expect Boss Yin to come personally." Yin Zhongmu heard a voice beside his ear. He saw that one of the 4 knights had actually taken the initiative to walk out of the mana barrier and attack him with his sword. Forever. Cloud Twilight dodged to the side, dodging the sword. The opponent's speed shocked him. This was definitely an attack that had added points into agility. Yin Zhongmu had never encountered a knight like this before. Not bad. After replying, Eternal raised his hand and cast a spell. Yin Zhongmu felt his body tighten. Then he saw a jet black sword flash towards him. Yin Zhongmu hurriedly dodged again, but this time his movements were actually a bit slower. Dark Knight. Yin Zhongmu was also a knowledgeable person. Before level 40, the knight profession had some blessing skills that strengthened the player's attributes. However, after the profession change at level 40, the Radiant Knight's blessing skills would be strengthened, while the Dark Knight's blessing skills would be greatly weakened. In this way, the Dark Knight's skills before level 40 were basically useless. This clearly didn't make sense. As such, after the profession change, the player could choose to change their skills from Darkness Corruption, Blessing to Curse. This was a free choice question. The player could continue to be a blessing and not a cursor. There were quite a few Dark Knights who kept their blessing skills temporarily. According to their research, curses were more useful in PvP. As for leveling up, a half-baked blessing was much more useful than a curse. Of course, there were Dark Knights who used curses in Twilight's guild. His movements had suddenly slowed down. Evidently, his agility had been cursed. After dodging the sword, he looked at his stats page. As expected, his agility had been weakened. Eternal's Knight had obviously added points into agility. The Knight profession was balanced. There were no advantages or disadvantages in any of the attributes, so there was no harm in adding anything. Yin Zhongmu had seen many that added points into constitution and intelligence. He had also seen those that added points into agility, but he had never seen one that added as much as Eternal. This was because after being cursed, he discovered that his speed was actually not as fast as Eternal's. Being unable to rely on speed to fight was fatal for an assassin. Yin Zhongmu's heart hardened. He simply rushed forward and shouted to his other brothers, "Fight!" Before, everyone had not realized why Yin Zhongmu was tricked, but now they knew why they had to fight. Because their opponents weren't just 4 people, but 30 people. A whole 30 people. The casual crowd on the street was just as pretentious as them. As soon as the battle began, they had already quickly rushed forward. This was a trap. Yin Zhongmu thought of guarding against a mole, but he did not expect the mole to directly pretend to be an informant and directly send out false information to lure them over. It could be said that he had betrayed them to the end. On one side were the 50 elites of the 10 Guilds Alliance, and on the other side were the 30 who could be counted as elites in the entire game. Although Yin Zhongmu had the advantage in numbers, he had to admit that they were the ones who needed to fight. Butterfly Knot. I just didn't write a summary yesterday. There were actually many comrades who were concerned about what happened to me in private messages. Sigh, there's really no way. Chapter 829. Both sides were battle teams that had been planning for a long time. Their originally scattered and unorganized positions suddenly adjusted at this moment. Both sides used the most common formation in PvP. Front guard, back archer, 2 wings, thieves free to move around. However, Cloud Twilight wasn't free at all. After his agility was lowered by Eternal Curse, he was immediately suppressed. Cloud Twilight wanted to turn around and return to his own team, but he couldn't get away. Eternal Curse's sword flashed like black lightning. The sword was clearly not an ordinary weapon. Adding on the bonus damage from the Dark Paladin, even if it was just a normal attack, Cloud Twilight didn't dare to casually block it. The people who had wanted to cut off the 4's path of retreat were now in an awkward situation. Not only had they cut off the 3's path of retreat, but the 3 had also cut off their path of retreat. These 2 small groups of people wanted to return to their original positions, so they became the first to engage in close combat. However, the others weren't much slower. In an instant, the entire street was filled with the sounds of all sorts of skills being exchanged. As expected of the top players on the level rankings, every one of them had a skill that normal players hadn't seen before. As soon as they started fighting, the 10 Guild Alliance didn't know what to do. However, the brothers that Yun Zhongmu personally led were also ruthless. Even though they were at a disadvantage in terms of strength, they didn't have any intention of retreating. The entire group of people charged forward despite the unknown skills that they didn't know about. They wanted to get close to the enemy and create a situation where they outnumbered them. The Eagle group was clearly not prepared for this group of people's bravery. They had been fighting with the 10 Guild Alliance for a long time, and they had always had the upper hand. The 30 of them had been showing off their might the entire time, but now, they were witnessing the true bloodlust of the 10 Guild Alliance. These guys were yelling "Grandpa, grandson," as they charged forward. It looked like they had lost all reason, but even though they looked crazy, their thoughts were very clear, and they still cooperated with each other. There were more than 50 of them, but they weren't destroyed by the Eagle group as easily as the shopping group of 100. The members of Eagle's party were all veterans who had dominated the game for many years. They knew that they were up against a tough opponent this time. As a result, they gave up on any thoughts of instantly killing or crushing their opponent, and began to seriously deal with their opponent. There were no more tricks in the chaotic battle. It was a head-on clash between the comprehensive strength of both sides. In terms of equipment, techniques, and cooperation, the Eagle group had the advantage in all aspects. On the side of the 10 Society Alliance, the most obvious advantage was the number of people, and the other was their momentum. With this kind of momentum, they all had the mentality of fighting with their lives on the line. Most of the time, they didn't care about their own life and death at all. They only hoped that this attack could hit their opponent and take away their opponent's life, paving the way for their brothers who would attack later. Under this kind of pressure, the Eagle party had no choice but to take a step back. They didn't want to die in battle, especially since they had been busy all day. Everyone had PK points on them, and if they died, they would suffer heavy losses. The Eagle party began to fight steadily, protecting the cleric first and then patiently fighting against the 10 Guild Alliance players. Their team was as one and didn't panic at all as they moved through the streets. On the surface, it looked like the 10 Guild Alliance had surrounded them, but in reality, they were constantly moving as a whole, looking for gaps in the 10 Guild Alliance's formation to focus their attacks. Cloud Twilight didn't think that the other side would be so patient. This was the 10 Guild Alliance's territory. Many people had already rushed over to help, but the other side didn't have any thoughts of ending the battle quickly. They were simply too fearless. Cloud Twilight was angry, but he couldn't do anything. In 1v1, he was forever suppressed. In a team battle, he couldn't think of a way to deal with the other side's multiplayer fighting style. Seeing that the brothers who charged forward were about to be captured and killed by the enemy, Cloud Twilight hurriedly stopped everyone from rashly attacking. Retreat and recover. We're not in a hurry. Cloud Twilight reminded everyone not to be impatient. They had time to deal with the other side. The ones in a hurry to finish the battle were the Eagle party. The people who were in the middle of fighting came to a realization and temporarily retreated. However, Eagle's party accurately grasped the moment when their opponents switched positions. Their formation suddenly spread out again, and the front line was filled with warriors. Instead of using charge, they used Whirlwind Slash to cover the entire street, spinning and moving forward at high speed. Mages attack. Cloud Twilight roared. The priority of the warriors' Whirlwind Slash was extremely high. Only the mage's spells had a chance to deal damage to the warriors. However, the Eagle party was prepared. The cleric followed closely behind and healed the warriors. A row of spells rained down. Rays of white light rose, but the warriors didn't fall and continued to spin. Fuck, how much rage did they store up? Seeing how the other side's Whirlwind Slash continued for a long time, Cloud Twilight finally realized that the other side's fighting style was one after another. Previously, he had shrunk into a ball and let the 10 Guild Alliance hit him, but the warriors were able to hold on until they were full of rage. But now the Whirlwind Slash was coming at him in a row. There was no collision between the Whirlwind Slashes. The control of the skill was too strong. After this row of Whirlwind Slashes, more than 10 of Cloud Twilight's brothers died. Seeing that the other side's Whirlwind Slash had stopped, Zhu Xian roared, "Brothers, it's our turn." As soon as he said this, another warrior flew out from behind the warriors. An earth-shattering slash descended from the sky. Zhu Xian quickly raised his axe to block. The loud sound was so loud that everyone's eardrums hurt. Zhu Xian cried out ouch, and flew out diagonally. It was obvious that he did not have enough strength and could not withstand this heavy blow. After the earth-shattering slash, the mage's spells also arrived. Cloud Twilight and the others had no choice but to continue to retreat. Those who couldn't retreat in time could only watch as they turned into white light and disappeared. Fuck! Cloud Twilight's eyes were bloodshot. Charge with me. I don't believe that we can't even take down one person. He didn't care about his life anymore. With a swift step, he rushed through the sea of flames and pounced towards the earth-shattering slash guy. The others also roared and followed Cloud Twilight's instructions. They used everything they could to attack this person. This person clearly didn't expect Cloud Twilight to be willing to make such a huge sacrifice just to kill him. This was completely out of his expectations. Cloud Twilight, who rushed out of the sea of flames, was still smoking. However, it didn't affect his agility at all. He moved in a zigzag pattern, and was about to flash behind the warrior. Suddenly his body tightened and his footsteps slowed down. Fuck you, Eternal. Cloud Twilight knew that Eternal had cursed his agility again. He was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. With this delay, the warrior also had the time to turn around. Whirlwind Slash came out. Cloud Twilight ducked his head and dodged. He saw that all 30 of the enemy's weapons were pointed at him. Yeah. Silhouettes rushed out of the sea of flames. How could Cloud Twilight's brothers just stand there and watch? The two warriors charged forward. This time, the earth-shattering slash player couldn't dodge in time. The two warriors collided head-on and sent him flying. Fuck, how are we supposed to kill him when he's so far away? Cloud Twilight cursed. Fuck, you're only level 39 after dropping a level, and you're still so arrogant. The one who spoke was Broken Cloud. He and the others had just knocked away the guy who looked like he was about to chop Cloud Twilight's head off. Even if I drop to level 0, I'm going to take down one of them today. Cloud Twilight roared. He waved his hand at the mages and archers who normally wouldn't enter the enemy's formation. Everyone attack. Kill them all. In close combat, archers and mages couldn't perform well because they could easily injure their own allies. Mages in particular had AoE spells, which were forbidden skills in chaotic battles. However, at this moment, Cloud Twilight was throwing caution to the wind. He was going to take down one of his opponents, even if he had to die. When the mages and archers heard this, they didn't care anymore. They used whatever skills they had. They could hit whoever they wanted with magic and arrows. In any case, they could just throw them with their eyes closed. When Eternal saw that the other side was acting so recklessly, he knew that a few of them might actually die. He didn't think that sacrificing a few people for the other side was worth it. He hurriedly ordered his troops to retreat. Fuck, are you scared? Cowards. Cloud Twilight was furious when he saw that the other side was retreating. The players from the 10 Guilds Alliance also chased after them. In the end, Eternal firmly controlled the rhythm of the battle. He suddenly turned around and fired at the ranged players. A few more players from the 10 Guilds Alliance were killed. At the same time, the mages, priests, and archers that had always been behind Cloud Morning, and the other melee classes suddenly fell into chaos. 3 assassins from the other side had stealthily sneaked into their midst. After suddenly appearing, they fiercely hacked at these fellows who were powerless in close combat. The 3 assassins had frighteningly high attack power. In just a short while, they had carved out an empty space. Cloud Twilight and the others hurriedly wanted to come back and help, but the 3 assassins had already fled far away. In the end, Eternal led his troops and charged over again. Cloud Twilight couldn't take care of his head, nor could he take care of his head. He was so anxious that he wanted to turn the entire street upside down. At this moment, one of the brothers beside him suddenly pointed behind Eternal and the others. Help is here. When he pointed, Eternal and the others naturally turned around to look. They found that there were only 6 or 7 of these so-called helpers. They had arrived quite quickly. They were obviously thieves and archers. It was just a few more people. What was there to be afraid of? The helpers were actually people who had split off from Cloud Twilight's team. They had originally been told to take a detour to prevent the thieves from escaping. They had taken the long way around, so they were naturally a bit late. Only, it was just these fellas who took a back path, so it wasn't enough to make Yun Zanmu this excited. The reason he was excited was because he saw that there was another black-robed fella who rushed over with the small squad he had sent out. At this moment, Cloud Twilight suddenly felt much better. This change was too obvious compared to the malevolent expression on his face. Was it really worth being so happy that only a few people had come? Eternal turned around doubtfully. This time, he finally saw clearly that the group of people that had arrived weren't just thieves and archers. There was also a person in a black robe. A mage that adds agility. It's him. Eternal quickly realized. The boss had given him a hint about this person, but he didn't think that he would have the chance to meet him so soon. Just how terrifying was this guy who was rumored to be invincible in the game? Attention, attention. The mage coming from behind is very likely to be Qianli drunk. Eternal hurriedly sent a message in the channel. I didn't expect to meet him here. Should I go and ambush him? One of the top thieves on the leaderboard was eager to give it a try. I heard that this guy has some sort of anti-stealth ability. Stealth is useless against him. Evidently, everyone in Eagle's team had familiarized themselves with Qianli Drunk's ambush last night. That's because those trash thieves aren't proficient enough in stealth, right? 844 expressed his disdain. Retreat. Eternal suddenly said. What? The team was shocked. Qianli Drunk's arrival was an accident. We weren't prepared to deal with this sort of accident. Retreat first. Eternal said. Hey, we have 30 people. Are we afraid of him? 8444 said. It's not that we're afraid. We can't PK without preparation. Plus, Qianli Drunk isn't alone. Cloud Twilight and the others are still alive and well. Eternal said. Those guys. One more wave and they'll be completely crippled. 844444 said. But now that we have Qianli Drunk, the situation is different. In short, those with speed, find an opportunity to escape. Everyone else, look for an opening and use a scroll. Eternal didn't argue any further, and gave his orders with an unquestionable tone. The members of Eagle's team obeyed his orders. Leaving halfway through the battle wasn't something they hadn't done before. As a result, the agility-equipped players first engaged in harassment and protection, while the agility-less players fainted a few times. Then they suddenly gathered together and used a transfer scroll. As soon as these people disappeared, the players with agility also scattered in search of a way out. In less than half a minute, the street, which had been filled with the heat of battle, suddenly fell silent. In the blink of an eye, the members of the Eagle team had all left. The last thing Cloud Twilight and the others saw was a figure turning a corner and disappearing into the street. Cloud Twilight looked at his surviving brothers. Every one of them was covered in sweat. Even though it had only been a few minutes, it had been an extremely difficult battle for them. Cloud Twilight did a quick head count. 21 of them had died. Compared to the other teams that had been wiped out so easily, his group of brothers were quite fierce. Why did they all leave? Some people were still confused, so someone pointed at the black-robed mage who was about to reach them. But when the black-robed mage arrived, everyone was speechless. Whose idea was this? Cloud Twilight asked. One of the reinforcements said. I'm ashamed. Yin Zhongmu felt that he had no place to hide his face. Eagle's team, an elite team that had slaughtered their 50 or so players until they were at a loss, was actually scared off by a random black-robed mage who ran fast. Just how much influence did the real owner have? Cloud Twilight looked at his friend list. Qianli wasn't online at all when he was drunk. Do I still have to ask him for help? Cloud Twilight thought to himself. This direct confrontation had finally allowed him to accurately determine the strength of Eagle's team. An ordinary team of 100 players wasn't a match for the 30 of them. What should he do now? Should he change the guild's announcement and ask everyone to gather for an event? Cloud Twilight couldn't change it anymore. The more he changed, the more incompetent the guild would seem, and the more it would seem like his disdain for Eagle's team was just empty talk. Did every team find someone to dress up like this? Cloud Twilight looked at the guy who was pretending to be Qianli drunk and smiled bitterly. This kind of trick worked once, and if it worked twice or thrice, then Eagle's team was an idiot team. Old Cloud, what do we do now? Someone asked. Let's go, Cloud Twilight said. Go where? Damn it, how would I know? Cloud Twilight was annoyed. Jahuamu, that bastard. I'll call people to kill him. Someone yelled. Jahuamu was the spy who had tricked them into coming here. Of course, he had already left the guild. That's a small matter. Cloud Twilight waved his hand. Eagle's team hadn't been able to kill them all, and they had even escaped. However, no one present was in a good mood. Even someone like Yin Zhongmu, who understood the situation, could only laugh bitterly at the last trick of pretending to be drunk for 1,000 li. Only an idiot like Zhu Xian would enthusiastically discuss the feasibility of everyone pretending to be drunk for 1,000 li to scare each other to death. What they didn't know was that there were still people tailing them. Qianli drunk, huh? I want to see just how strong you are. As an agile assassin, he was naturally the last to retreat. However, he really wanted to test the depths of Qianli drunk, so after circling around, he concealed himself with stealth. At this moment, he was quite brazen as he tailed behind Cloud Twilight's team. Just based on the successful ambush of the 3 thieves from Eagle's team, he was certain that they didn't have any anti-stealth abilities. The closer he got, the more he wanted to test out the legendary anti-stealth abilities of Qianli drunk. 9 meters, right? 8 meters. 7 meters. Even in stealth, Shisan could easily keep up with the pace of the other team, because he had equipment that increased his movement speed in stealth. At this moment, he was counting the distance between him and Qianli drunk. There were many different opinions on the forum about Qianli drunk's anti-stealth abilities, and some bullshit killing intent. Shisan wanted to laugh just thinking about it. He didn't care what ability it was, he just wanted to figure out the distance first. As a result, all the way to the front, Shisan estimated that he could hold Qianli drunk's hand, but this guy who was said to be ineffective against stealth still didn't notice at all. Damn, I knew that the forum was full of gossip, nothing real. Shisan cursed in his heart. Looking at this guy that he could stab with his hand, he considered whether or not to make a move. No matter what, he's still a mage, his HP and defense aren't that high. I can kill him with a few quick slashes, can't I? Shisan was really bold. Not only did he sneak into the 10 Society Alliance's team, he even wanted to reveal himself to kill someone. Chapter 830. Mayason was someone who dared to do what he said. As soon as he had this thought, he immediately made his move. With a dagger in hand, he took a deep breath and quickly attacked with 2 slashes and a backstab. As he expected, the opponent was instantly killed. Mayason's attack was extremely high, otherwise he wouldn't have the confidence to sneak an attack in a crowd. His attack and his escape were carried out at the same time. Mayason didn't want to lose his life here. He had made up his mind that after the 2 backstab attacks, he would run even if the opponent didn't die. As such, he only saw his target turn into a white light after he escaped from Yin Zhongmu's group. Yin Zhongmu and the others didn't expect someone to be so bold as to sneak into their group and kill them. By the time they reacted, Mayason had already jumped out of the crowd and laughed. I'm Mayason from Eagle Group. Is this the legendary Qianli's drunk? How disappointing. After saying this, he disappeared. No matter how arrogant he was, he knew that he wasn't capable of fighting 1 against 30. Leader, I killed Qianli's drunk. Mayason proudly announced in the channel. Oh, Eternal was surprised. What anti-stealth? I knew it was because those people in stealth were too bad. I just casually went behind him and killed him with 1 slash. Mayason said. 1 slash? Eternal asked. Alright, it was 2 slashes and a backstab. Mayason said. If Qianli's drunk is that easy to deal with, then the rumors are too exaggerated. Eternal said. That's right. Who would believe those rumors on the internet? Mayason was still immersed in the excitement of killing the parallel world's #1 expert. Alright, we won't be doing any large-scale operations today. Team 3 go and rest. Team 1 and 2, continue to be on duty. Split up and just hunt. Eternal ordered. The 10 people from Eagle Group's Team 3 immediately went offline. Group 3 wasn't supposed to be on duty right now, but due to Yin Zhongmu's words in the guild chat, Eternal called the members of Group 3 over. The 30 of them dealt a devastating blow to the 100-man team of the 10 Guild Alliance, using this opportunity to strike at the morale of the 10 Guild Alliance. Soon after, Cloud Twilight recruited spies in the guild to hunt them down. When Eternal found out about this, he took advantage of the situation to lure the snake out of its hole. The result was out of his expectations. The team led by Cloud Twilight was extremely tough. It would be difficult for Eternal to take them down in one go. As time dragged on, there would be more and more people from the 10 Societies Alliance. At that time, he might not even have the chance to use the teleportation scroll. Therefore, when Qianli appeared, Forever decided to retreat. As for whether that person was Qianli or not, he was also doubtful. At the time, he was more convinced because he saw the change in Yin Zhongmu's expression. It didn't seem to be an act. Eternal didn't know that Yin Zhongmu really thought that the person was Qianli's drunken. His expression was obviously genuine. When he heard that Bai Shisan killed Qianli's drunken, Eternal suspected that Qianli's drunken was a fake. There was no need to guess. Eternal had already sent people to investigate. Not long after, someone sent him a message. The newly updated experience leaderboards. Qianli's drunken is still number 1. Eternal sighed. He actually hoped that Qianli's drunken was real, and that he would be killed by Bai Shisan if he wasn't careful. Unfortunately, Qianli's drunken was someone else. He believed that he wouldn't be as weak as this fake. Seeing that Bai Shisan was still bragging in the chat, Eternal had to remind him, "It's too early for you to be happy." On the newly updated experience leaderboards, Qianli's drunken didn't lose any levels. The person you killed wasn't Qianli's drunken. Then who was it? Bai Shisan was stunned. Anyone can put on a black robe and run a bit faster, right? Have any of you seen Qianli's drunken before? Eternal said. Of course no one had. We can't rule out the possibility that these guys will pretend to be like this in the future. Everyone be careful. Don't treat it as if it's fake. If it's fake, then it'll be troublesome. Eternal said. At this time, it wasn't just the Eagle Corps that was thinking about Gu Fei. Yin Zhongmu was also thinking about him. After the battle with the Eagle Group, everyone returned to the leveling area. Yin Zhongmu had been thinking about whether or not he should ask Gu Fei to help. He had plenty of time to think about it because Gu Fei hadn't been online for the entire day. The Eagle Group had surprisingly quietened down a lot, and didn't carry out any large-scale attacks. Yin Zhongmu shamelessly said in the chat that they had a big battle with the Eagle Group outside the Thief Guild. They had fought bravely and scared off the Eagle Group. Those bastards only dared to sneak around now, and everyone needed to be more careful in the future. If 100 people wasn't enough, then 200 people could do it together. Yin Zhongmu didn't have the face to seriously tell everyone. If 100 people can't deal with the Eagle Group, then 200 people. He could only say it in a joking manner. He also hoped that people would start forming a 200-man party as a joke. He even had his trusted players encourage everyone to form a 200-man party. The players wanted something new in the game. Thinking about 200 people dominating the mountains and plains was quite interesting. As a result, everyone responded to the call. Yin Zhongmu saw that they could deal with it for the time being, and let out a sigh of relief. But what about Qianli's drunken? Why wasn't he online yet? Even though Yin Zhongmu hadn't decided whether or not to ask for his help, it was better to know that he was in the game. When the time came, he would have a place to call for help. Yin Zhongmu waited until nightfall, but Gu Fei was still nowhere to be seen. On this day, Yin Zhongmu was numb to receiving reports from his guild members that they had been ambushed and killed. The guild members were also numb to the guild leader's words that the opponents were just paper tigers. If they were really paper tigers, they would have been brandishing their claws and fangs for an entire day. During this time, there were people who suggested that everyone not wear their guild badges. This was a very good suggestion, but Yin Zhongmu didn't accept it. At this time, he wasn't just considering his own mentality. He was considering the personality of the players in his guild, Or rather, the personality of the players in Moonlit Night City. Most players might think that taking off their guild badges and not revealing their identity was a trivial matter, but for the players of the 10 Guilds Alliance, not revealing their identity was a disgrace and a sign of weakness. The players who joined the 10 Guilds Alliance came because of their arrogance. The players of Moonlit Night City loved this kind of arrogance. Now that they were scared to the point where they didn't dare to reveal their identity, it was very difficult to accept. If they suggested this method now, it would be equivalent to lowering their head to the Eagle Group. No matter how many people were willing to do it, the reputation of the guild would fall through the floor. This would not only affect the guild internally, but also the 10 Guilds Alliance in Moonlit Night City. They would be scared off by a mercenary group of 30 to the point where they didn't even dare to wear their guild badges. The players who came to look down on them didn't care about how elite these 30 people were, or what methods they used. Of course, Yin Zhongmu didn't want to be passive. He also organized people to search for the whereabouts of the Eagle Group at the revival point, but to no avail. Apart from that, Cloud Twilight also launched a few attacks offline. For example, he sent some of his friends who liked to post on the forums to Moonlit Night City's forum to raise their flags and shout their battle cries. They looked down on Eagle Group for being hired by Fancy Workshop and making things difficult for the players. But the problem was that a mercenary group was an organization that worked for other people's money. Many players in the game played this way. It didn't matter who the employer was as long as they paid. Unless it was a bitch like Silver Moon, they would definitely be looked down upon. As for image, not every player hated it as much as Deepwater. Most players were used to this kind of service industry in the game, so they didn't have much of a conflict. As such, they didn't understand why Image hired the Eagle Group to deal with the 10 Guilds Alliance. On the other hand, most players in Moonlit Night City knew that the 10 Guilds Alliance had started to suppress Image for no reason, and even started a war in the city. Not only did the 10 Guilds Alliance not get any support, but they also got themselves into trouble. Moreover, someone pointed out that the 10 Guilds Alliance couldn't beat the Eagle Group, so they came to the forums to ask for support. This made Yin Zhongmu extremely angry. He hated that he didn't have the right to delete the post on the forums. He could only scold the bastards who posted it for not having the ability to influence the public opinion. His subordinate also felt wronged. Wasn't it just a post? Who knew there would be so many deep thoughts? We're not professionals, so how would we know? It would have been fine if this offline attack was just a joke, but the result was that the 10 Societies Alliance quickly received countless posts denouncing them. From the analysis of why the 10 Societies Alliance bullied the well-behaved Ingenious Studios, to the series of tyrannical actions that the 10 Societies Alliance had developed to this day, and even to the primitive era when everyone was 30 years old, they wrote that Yin Zhongmu and his group were like beggars begging on the streets. In comparison, they had become nouveau riche, and they were showing off just because they had a bit of power. It was obvious that these posts were written by professionals. Yin Zhongmu was furious when he heard about it, and said that he wanted to go offline and fight with people on the forums. Everyone in the guild was afraid. None of them were afraid of PK, but they were fine with going to the forums to pick a fight with people and scolding them with "fuck your grandpa." However, they were not good at arguing over words and arguing for what was right. That was not their forte. In the end, Yin Zhongmu refused and wanted to fight with the other side. Many of his old friends couldn't stop him, and in the end, Yin Zhongmu gathered hundreds of people to go offline and attack the forums. Yin Zhongmu let out a long sigh. At least these hundreds of people won't be ambushed by the Eagle Group. He switched to the forums. The hundreds of people were quite impactful, but very quickly, half of them were reported and banned for using vulgar words. They looked at the screen and wanted to smash their computers. "Boss, I've been banned. Boss, I've been banned too. I've been banned, I'm going back to the game, boss. What do we do now, boss? What do we do? I've been banned too." Yin Zhongmu was furious. Everything was going his way. He was silenced even when he posted on the forums. He couldn't use the godly skill of "damn it," and it was about to burst his run and do meridians. There was nothing that could hide from Brother Yu on the forums. The parallel world was huge and the forums were huge too. There were more than 100 sections in the main city section, and it was impossible to browse through them. However, Brother Yu was a professional spammer, and he had a keen sense of the forums. He could always find the hottest topics at the first moment, and soon he came into contact with the war of words in Moonlit Night City. Brother Yu was stunned. The dispute with Ing Chi started because of them, but now that everything in Cloud City was over, why was it getting worse in Moonlit Night City? Judging from the public opinion on the forums, the 10 Clubs Alliance was in a bad situation. He had heard of this Eagle group before. It was a force from a distant main city. They actually came to Moonlit Night City to challenge the 10 Clubs Alliance, which had the most number of people in the game. Brother Yu was itchy, and he had the urge to write a post. Fortunately, he didn't forget that the 10 Clubs Alliance was an old friend of theirs. After looking through a few posts with Big Brother Yu's experience, he could tell at a glance that these dual posts were intentional, especially those that attacked the 10 Guilds Alliance. It was obvious that these dual posts were written by professional gunners. Since the opponent was a workshop, it was easy for ordinary players to spend money to motivate these players. In Brother Yu's impression, Yin Zhongmu was just an ordinary player, and he didn't look like a rich playboy. Let's go back to the game first. Brother Yu suppressed his desire to continue enjoying the gossip and entered the game. Immediately, he received a lot of system notifications telling him to pick up his mail. This was one of the reasons why Brother Yu didn't want to enter the game. Guild recruitment, selection, interviews, there were many and complicated things to do. And now everyone was as busy as a dog. Brother Yu went online to pick up the mail, and after handing it to someone he quickly went offline and disappeared. There was a limit to a person's enthusiasm for work, and it was easy to be overwhelmed by the excessive workload. Something big happened. Brother Yu shouted as soon as he came up. What's bigger than looking at 500 resumes? Unscathed in battle was dumbfounded. Of course, the job of selecting people was handed over to these experts. Only experts had foresight. At this moment, he and Yutian Shenming each held 500 resumes, and it was said that there would be more later on. It was unbearable. Shui Mizu and Lu Ku were all pulled in as temporary workers. Yin Zhongmu and the others are still fighting with Ing Chi. Brother Yu said, "Oh, there's still people in Ing Chi?" Han Family Young Master was quite surprised. Today when Nitrite contacted him, he was half happy and half worried, and told him that the headhunting was going very smoothly. Ing Chi's first-line director and second-line city manager were all swept away, and all of them were under Yin Teng's command. Suddenly, there were more than 100 people, and they were assigned to positions. Nitrite had been working until now and hadn't slept yet. Very good. You have perfectly fulfilled our agreement. This was how the young master of the Han family replied. Nitrite smiled bitterly. The agreement was fulfilled, and it was extremely successful. For Yin Teng, the challenge had just begun. If he couldn't use the efficiency method to digest all of these people and get them on the right track, Yin Teng would very likely be directly suppressed. Baishir still hasn't come out? Nitrite had dealt with Baishir Jingluan many times, so he could be considered familiar with him. If he hasn't gone offline since he went to jail, he'll probably be out in the wee hours of this morning. Han Family Young Master said. Then has he gone offline yet? I heard that he hasn't gone online since last night. Han Family Young Master said. I'll go call him. Nitrite directly went offline. The result of going offline was that Baishir Jingluan had no choice but to go back online and go to jail. He didn't have the life of a young master like Gu Fei, and he still had to rely on this to support his family. From Nitrite's anxious state of mind, Han Family Young Master knew that their headhunting this time had put a lot of pressure on them, and it seemed like it was extremely successful. Now that he heard Brother Yu say that Ing Chi was still fighting, he was naturally a bit surprised. Yes, they invited the Eagle Group. Brother Yu said. Eagle Group? What's that? Han Family Young Master had never heard of it. Hee, it's not surprising that you guys don't know, because this is in a city far, far away in a parallel world. Brother Yu began to show off, but then someone suddenly interrupted him. I know. To have this kind of experience, naturally, it had to be Drifting, who had been to countless main cities, and had been judged as a vagabond by the system. Which one of you said? Han family young master asked. Brother Yu of course was very enthusiastic. This was the moment where he had the most sense of existence. As soon as he went online, he had already found his notebook and flipped to the content related to the Eagle Group. The Eagle Group belongs to the Grassy City in the southeast region, but their usual activity isn't limited to Grassy City. There have been traces of the Eagle Group in about 16 main cities in the southeast region. There are 30 members in the group, and all of them are experts in the top 20 of the experience leaderboard. Oh, after the city war, the experience leaderboard was reshuffled, and I haven't updated the information I have, so this might not be accurate. Brother Yu interrupted halfway. Brother Yu, are you tired of sending messages? Come here and tell me directly. Han family young master was probably tired of reading messages all the time, and hoped that someone would directly speak into his ear. Honest Brother Yu immediately hugged his notebook and ran to the interview area where Han family young master and the others were at. When they saw that all the experts were there, everyone knew that Yun Zhongmu had helped them before, so they naturally had to return the favor. They were afraid that they would have to fight with this Eagle Group. Yun Zhongmu and the others don't seem to be in a good situation. Brother Yu also felt everyone's thoughts and hurriedly said, "Continue talking about that whatever group." Han family young master said, "Oh, there are 30 members, and they are all experts. True experts, I mean experts that don't lose to anyone here." Brother Yu said seriously. In the end, unscathed in battle and Yutian Shenming, who bore the brunt of it, snorted disdainfully. Drifting nodded his head at the side. Brother Yu is right, they really are all very high-level experts. How high? As high as you? Isn't that trash? Yutian Shenming sneered. Drifting smiled and didn't look back at Yutian Shenming. He began to talk about what he knew. I've been in Eagle Group, so I know their level very well. They don't lose to anyone here. Oh, then you know more. Tell me. When Brother Yu heard that the person next to him was someone he had fought personally, he immediately felt like he had lost his cool, so he hurriedly gave way. You should tell me. That was a long time ago, and the group leader was still Soaring Eagle. I heard that the group leader changed after that, Drifting said. That's right. The current group leader of Eagle Group is the number 1 on the Knight leaderboard. He's also a Dark Knight Eternity. Brother Yu couldn't help but get excited when he heard that there was an expert of the same profession, especially one from the same branch as him. Who are you talking about? Han family young master, who didn't know if he heard it or not, suddenly became spirited. Chapter 831. The Han family young master wasn't the only one who reacted. Water Depth and Lu Ku were both hugging a stack of resumes and hiding in a corner. When they heard this name, the two of them raised their heads and looked at each other. Everlasting, number 1 on the Knight leaderboards. Everlasting. Brother Yu repeated, but he quickly realized that being number 1 on the level leaderboards wouldn't shock anyone in the room, especially the Han family young master. Even Qianli would look down on him when he was drunk. What was the point of being number 1 on the Knight leaderboards? There had to be another reason for this person's sudden shock. You know each other? Drifting looked at the Han family young master in confusion. The Han family young master hesitated for a moment, which was very rare. He looked back and saw that Water Depth and Lu Ku had walked over from the corner. Friends who were slightly familiar with each other knew that Sword Demon, Han family young master, Water Depth, and Lu Ku were old friends in the game. Seeing the three's reactions, it wasn't hard to imagine that Everlasting was an old friend of theirs. It wasn't strange for old players like them to know each other. It was just that the parallel world randomly sent everyone to the main cities, so it wasn't convenient for them to come and go if they were too far away. But if they were old friends, then they should be able to add each other as friends, right? Is it him? Water Depth walked over and said, not necessarily. Everlasting's name is very common. It's easy to get someone else to add him. Lu Ku said, old rival. Drifting made a logical deduction. They knew each other and seemed to care about each other, but they hadn't added each other as friends. It was very likely that they were old rivals. Rival? I've always wanted to have this opportunity. The Han family's young master suddenly said, if it's him, Then this is really a coincidence. Water Depth said. When will Sword Demon come out? Luca suddenly asked. If he doesn't sleep, then he'll be out at around 2 or 3 in the afternoon tomorrow. The Han family young master said. Does this guy have an offline account? I don't know. He's always here when I'm here. All of the Sword Demon's friends who were present expressed this one after another. They seriously suspected that the Sword Demon had never gone offline since he entered prison. With Sword Demon's tenacity, everyone believed that he could do it. Then, should we go and settle this matter before this guy comes out? Shueishan asked the Han family young master. The two of them conversed amiably, which was rare for them. We can't be sure that this is always that guy, Han family young master said. His name is Eternal, and he's able to climb to the top of the leaderboard. It's because this guy has a high chance of climbing. You noticed him a long time ago, didn't you? Said Deepwater. Sorry, I never look at the ranking list. Han family young master said. The others were confused and finally couldn't help but crowd around them. Yutian Shinming hurriedly interrupted. What are you guys talking about? Speak clearly. What does forever have to do with you? We have all kinds of relationships, Deepwater said, from never knowing him, to being a friend, to being an extraordinary friend, and then to being an enemy. Enemy. Everyone showed an expression as if they had expected this. Although everyone was a celebrity in the online gaming world, the previous online games were split into different servers. Experts could only discuss common topics like strategies and techniques on the forums. As for the grudges between people, players from different servers basically didn't have anything in common and wouldn't pay much attention to the grudges and gossip of other servers. Therefore, the normal players did not know what kind of story Sword Ghost and the others had in the past. Therefore, everyone turned to look at Brother Yu, who was unconventional in this aspect. There are people involved, why are you still looking at me? Brother Yu wasn't in a good mood. It's time to test your abilities. Unscathed in Battle said. Brother Yu really did know a bit. Is it something that happened in Battle of the Heavens? Battle of the Heavens. Yutian Shenming was also excited. Battle of the Heavens was also an online game that he had played in. He couldn't wait to ask. Which server are you guys in? What class? Then he stared at Drifting. I didn't ask you. Drifting smiled but didn't say anything. The others also stared at Yutian Shenming expressionlessly. Yutian Shenming lowered his head. Yes, it's something that happened in that game. Han family young master nodded. Oh, that thing is. Brother Yu's brain wasn't a hard drive, so he couldn't read the information easily. Although he had some impression of it, he couldn't tell the specifics of the gossip. He touched his pocket and immediately remembered that the information he compiled was all offline. He didn't need it in the parallel world, so he naturally wouldn't copy it into the game. He couldn't gossip for a while, which was very painful. Everyone obviously wanted to hear the gossip. In fact, they were afraid that the person involved wouldn't want to talk about it, so they looked to Brother Yu. Seeing Brother Yu's expression, they were instantly disappointed. Brother Yu gritted his teeth. Wait, I'll go take a look. With us here, what's there to look for? Luca was helpless. The so-called experts. The key was that they were persistent enough. What is it? Everyone was in high spirits. Luca glanced at the other two and said, Everyone knows that the three of us and Sword Demon are old gaming partners. We've always played together. He had met this player called Eternal in Records of the Heavens. You should all remember this game. It's a game that places a lot of emphasis on teamwork. The standard team size is 5 people, and there were 4 of us. I was a swordsman, Deepwater was a magician, Sword Demon was a marksman, and Han family young master was an angel. With this lineup, you're missing a conjurer. Brother Yu couldn't help but interrupt. Luca nodded. That's right, our team was missing a conjurer, but we had already formed a gang. Usually, we would have a random person from the gang to team up with us. That was until we met Forever, and then he joined us. His skills and awareness were very good, so the 5 of us became a fixed team, and our relationship got better and better. This person was very amiable and interesting. Everyone in the gang liked him very much. But later, This fellow began to be at odds with the sword ghost, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Intentionally or unintentionally, he did it on purpose. That's why he came. Deepwater interrupted. Luca sighed. Sword Demon is a kind person. As long as what he said was reasonable, we would usually give in to him. But this guy was getting more and more insatiable. We couldn't stand it and would sometimes argue with him. Then there were more and more arguments, and many of the players in the gang also had disagreements. During the Azure Sky Route battle, it was clearly him who made 2 consecutive mistakes during the crucial moments of the battle, causing us to lose and get eliminated. In the end, he made a false accusation and complained that it was the Sword Ghost's double box flash that destroyed his seal. But at that time, it was clearly his control that was a step too slow, and the opponent's magician actually activated Hexapod. Sword Demon had no choice but to use double box flash. Of course, it would destroy his curse as well. At this time he didn't add a Hexapod curse. Is there any doubt about the result? It had been a long time, but Luca still remembered the details so clearly. It was obvious how deep the impression was. Everyone present was a master, and they understood the twists and turns of the story. Basically, he always made mistakes and Sword Demon helped him fix it, and then he made mistakes again. In the end, he still blamed Sword Demon. It was indeed quite outrageous. But Unscathed in Battle couldn't help but say, if the magician snatched the hexapod, the swordsman could immediately use Falling Flower Slash and Feast of V to break the hexapod. It would be more effective than Gunner's double box flash. Luca was a little embarrassed. Han family young master continued Unscathed in Battle's words, because Luca's skills aren't good enough, it's too difficult. Unscathed in Battle couldn't help but feel proud. That's true. Falling Flower Slash and Feast of V to accurately break the hexapod. It's not something an ordinary swordsman can do. But the problem is there weren't many swordsmen who could do this at that time, right? Most teams will choose to use double flash box, Cursemancer, and hexagram curse, Drifting said. That's why I said that this guy was just looking for a chance to show off. Don't pay attention to him. Yutian Shenming looked down on Unscathed in Battle, but he didn't forget to show off in the end. But to be honest, there's a trick to casting a hexapod. Falling Flower Slash and Feast of V are not invincible. As long as you cast Ice Reflect the moment you cast the hexapod, the appearance of the hexapod will be slightly delayed. Then Falling Flower Slash and Feast of V will be cast too early. Drifting opened his mouth and snatched away the words that Imperial Divine Ming was about to show off, which made Imperial Divine Ming very angry. However, Water Depth, who was also a magician at the time, was very surprised and said, casting an Ice Reflect while in the 6-Will realm? How fast do you have to be to do that? Yutian Shenming looked askance at him. That's why some people only know in theory. I doubt that they can actually use it. Drifting smiled. The truth is that there are no more than 4 people in the entire server who can use Falling Flower Slash and Feast of V to break through the hexapod. So even if you use hexapod and Ice Reflect, there's a 99% chance that you'll be turned into a hornet's nest by a noob's double box flash. A bunch of experts had twisted the story of a grudge into a show-off, but Brother Yu was still listening with relish. Of course, he had played this game before, but he didn't know that there were such gorgeous techniques. Obviously, these were show-off techniques that only existed among high-end players. Although it was something that was already in the coffin, it still reflected the realm of this group of people. Hey, do you want me to continue? Luca was very unhappy. It was just a point of victory in a battle, but she, the swordsman, and Water Depth, the magician, were both looked down upon by the masters here. These guys were really sick. I don't think there's any need to continue, Drifting said. It's obvious that Forever is at fault. If he said that you couldn't use Falling Flower Slash to break through the hexapod, then he's being unreasonable. If he said that you couldn't use Falling Flower Slash and Feast of V to break through the hexapod, then that's even more unreasonable. Also, his mistake was obviously intentional. If he's really at the same level as us, it's already ridiculous for him to make this kind of mistake once, let alone twice. He wasn't in front of the computer at the time, right? Yes, it was definitely intentional. The masters made a technical judgment. However, There's more than one way to make this kind of coordination, so it's hard to come to a conclusion. According to the way you guys played, he was wrong here, but he still had a lot of excuses. In short, he could easily create a dispute. That's probably why he made this mistake on purpose, Drifting said. Luca nodded. Anyway, even Sword Demon couldn't help it this time. After the dispute, he always pretended to be the weak one, and said that the four of us were against him. Luca held back her vulgarities, but she wasn't in the mood to continue. Then he left and took half of the players in the gang with him. We were originally the strongest gang in the server, but now we're at the bottom. Speaking of this, I have to mention a certain someone's contribution. If it wasn't for a certain someone being so annoying and intolerable, I think Forever would have at most taken a third, no, a quarter of the people, Shueishin said. Everyone looked at the Han family young master. The Han family young master nodded indifferently. This self-reflection is quite profound. Shameless. Shueishin gritted his teeth. Forever is indeed quite shameless. The Han family young master nodded again. I'm talking about you, Shueishin said. The Han family young master was indifferent and looked at the others. It's just like this. We've formed a grudge with Forever. Only Sword Demon treated this as a normal dispute, but we all think that Forever was purposefully trying to sow discord in our gang from the start. I remember that a certain someone almost got together with him at that time, right? Shueishin felt awkward and quickly explained to the others. I just wanted to stay away from some annoying things. Luca was gratified. Luckily, the four of us weren't provoked by him, because we don't need it at all. The Han family young master said. Right, I already hate a certain someone to the extreme. How else can I sow discord? Shueishin said. The others face-bombed. Shueishin continuously expressed his strong dislike towards the Han family young master, while the Han family young master repeatedly expressed his disregard for Shueishin. But up until now, these two seem to be the ones who talked the most. Brother, you did a rough calculation. Even the Yutian Shenming Unscathed in Battle group and Yutian Shenming Drifting group, who often argued with each other, couldn't compete with this group. Then what's his goal in trying to sow discord? Drifting asked. If it's the biggest guild in the server, you've pretty much taken over Azure Mountain, right? Azure Sword, who had been listening from the side and hadn't said anything, suddenly spoke. Of course, Shueishin replied. Azure Sword clearly had painful memories in the game. At this moment he couldn't bear to think back. If you can't take over Azure Mountain, you basically can't earn money in Records of the Heavens. And this game is really unbalanced. Flaming Shirt also complained. That's part of the charm. Back then, the fun PvP was all because of Azure Mountain. Unscathed in Battle said. Without a strong guild, you won't be able to survive in Azure Mountain. Azure Sword sighed. How long have you controlled Azure Mountain for? Drifting asked. Shueishin and Luca looked at each other with pride on their faces. 3 months. 3 months. All of the experts were shocked. In Records of the Heavens, a guild that could take over Azure Mountain for a week was already amazing. Heavenly Cloud Pavilion. You're a guild in 3 servers, right? Brother, you was indeed the king of intel. Although the others immediately remembered that there was a huge bull guild that took over Azure Mountain for 3 months in Records of the Heavens, they couldn't remember the name, let alone which server they were from. Heavenly Cloud Pavilion. Right, isn't it just Sword Demon? No, he was called Smoker. I remember now, haha. Brother, you was excited. If it wasn't for this guy, it would have been more than 3 months. Deepwater said. After this guy took away our people, he immediately joined another guild that was considered strong. On the same day, he took over our territory in Azure Mountain. Damn, who would believe that this wasn't premeditated? What happened after that? Azure Sword asked. After that, we fought back a few times, but we lost more than we won. Although they weren't as strong as us, they occupied most of the time. We thought about finding trouble with Eternal, but Sword Demon didn't agree. He said that it was normal for friends to part on good terms, and that it was normal for us to fight. There wasn't anything wrong. Sword Demon. He was so kind that I wanted to strangle him to death. Although Shueishan said that, when he mentioned Sword Demon, his expression of admiration was still revealed. Then this time, we had a good reason to fight, and the punishment for dying in the parallel world was huge. Isn't that great? Drifting smiled. Humph, I suspected that he was brought in by the studio. At that time, we occupied Azure Mountain and squatted at our studio. We couldn't make a lot of money. Now he's hired by Ying Qi. Is this guy born to be the studio's dog? Shueishan looked at him with disdain. Hey, even if he's working for the studio, you don't have to be so ugly, right? Azure Sword and the other guys who were about to start working with the studio expressed their dissatisfaction. Of course, I'm not talking about you guys. You guys are self-reliant and self-reliant. You guys are working for the studio. You guys are heroes, Shueishan said. The others smiled bitterly. Brother, you looked at the Han family young master. What do we do now? The Han family young master looked at Drifting. What do you think of the Eagle Group's strength? If they are compared to us, their number of experts in teamwork are above us. Drifting was honest. There were 30 people in the Eagle Group. If they were all in the top 20 of the experience ranking, then they would have more experts than the current very awesome group. As for their teamwork, it was very good. The teamwork of the experts on their side was completely based on their outstanding awareness. But now their opponents were experts of the same level. But their teamwork was built from fighting together for a long time. There was definitely a difference. We have Qianli, Yutian Shenming said. If we include Qianli, I don't know if I should multiply our strength by 2 or 1. That guy's strength is unfathomable. Drifting said. But Qianli isn't online, Sword Demon is still in prison and Baisher. Brother, you counted and realized that the 3 most powerful people on their side weren't here. If Baisher and the others come out, they must have something to do, right? The Han family young master said and glanced at Azure Sword and the others. Yunting Studio must be waiting for Baisher to come out of prison to make them do hard labor. These professional players, whose main goal was to make money, probably wouldn't participate in the battle against the Eagle Group. Chapter 832. Jiannan Yu understood what Han family young master meant. He scratched his head and said, I'm not sure what the arrangement will be. Without Baisher and without Danan and the other 6, Brother, you counted the number of people. Apart from a few trash, they're all the original members of our elite group, Yutian Shenming said. Indeed, it was very heaven-defying. There were only 6 elite members, Jiannan Yu's 7 and Drifting. 100 Realms strategist was actually considered an external helper. He had never joined their guild before. Drifting's 2 companions, who wrote love on their left and handsome on their right, were slightly worse. Yin Xiang was even worse. There was no need to mention Fireball. If Jiannan Yu's 7 and Bai Shi Jingluan were busy, then only the elite group and Drifting were left. There's a lot of pressure. Drifting concluded. If it wasn't for your shamelessness, we might have been a bit stronger. Imperial Sky Divine Ming said. You're so noisy. Unscathed in battle tossed Yutian Shenming into the corner. There's still the 2 of us. How can we not participate in fighting against that guy? Lu Kuo and Water asked. According to the records and records of Battle of the Ether, you 2 are still a bit away from being first class. Han family young master said. Lu Kuo was helpless. Unscathed in battle interrupted. If that's the case, then Brother Yu doesn't count either. Brother Yu burst into tears. Drifting smiled and said, It's not that exaggerated. The 30 of them aren't all top class. There's a difference between them. Plus, the parallel world is a new game. Their previous skills don't count. They felt relieved, but then Drifting added, But Brother Yu continued to cry. Let's go to Moonlit Night City first. Han family young master stood up. Aren't we going to wait for Qianli? Yutian Shenming came back from the corner. He felt sorry for the audience if he didn't bring a nuclear weapon. Who knows when that guy will come? Han family young master said. Do you want me to call him? Brother Yu was in high spirits because he had Gu Fei's contact number. Let's go to Moonlit Night City and take a look. Han family young master said. Therefore the experts all set off. Jian Nanyo's group of 7 had not come out yet. The 6 of them had nothing to do, so they decided to travel together. The guild's matters were all handed over to Yin Xiang. Yin Xiang looked at the pile of players' resumes and listened to Brother Yu telling the guild to forward all the resumes to him. Tears streamed down his face. The experts didn't even walk when they went out. After handing over the guild's work in Cloud City, they gathered together and used teleportation scrolls. Now that they have a close relationship with Yunting's studio, all the teleportation scrolls are picked up from their home. Of course, Yunting can't raise the price in the face of such a big customer. In reality, teleportation scrolls weren't very popular. They were expensive, one-time use items, and only used to save time. Only the rich would use them. It was just like how a poor butterfly would take a bus when it was near, and a train when it was far away. They would never take a taxi or plane just to save time. When they arrived at Moonlit Night City, they naturally contacted Yin Zhongmu first. Yin Zhongmu started a war on the forums. His first post was muted, and he returned to the game with a belly full of anger. In the end, the experts of Cloud City took the initiative to contact him. Yin Zhongmu was overjoyed. With such a big guild, he was too embarrassed to ask for help. However, since they took the initiative to help, Yin Zhongmu hurriedly accepted after a few polite words. Yin Zhongmu actually felt that his face was more important than his life. However, he was the leader of the guild, so he had to consider the big picture. At a crucial moment like this, his face was fine. The place where the two sides agreed to meet was naturally the Gathering Place Tavern. The experts of Cloud City arrived first. When Yin Zhongmu arrived, he was surrounded by hundreds of people. The experts of Cloud City were all at a loss. In their impression, although Yin Zhongmu was arrogant, he wasn't someone who liked to put on airs. That was something that only Sword Without Oath liked to do. Yin Zhongmu saw everyone's surprise and felt very awkward. After telling his brothers to sit wherever they wanted, he, Duan Yun, and the other core brothers sat together with the experts of Cloud City. There were many experts in Cloud City. One table couldn't fit everyone, so they sat at 2 tables, forming a circle. Although Yin Zhongmu's situation wasn't good, he still maintained his composure. As soon as he sat down, he took out a wine glass and raised it to the experts. Our 10 Guilds Alliance has lost a bit this time. I won't say any more polite words. Thank you in advance. Everyone hurriedly raised their glasses. Most of the time, it was Brother Yu who did the talking. He was also quite familiar with the way he spoke. In the end, this started because of us. How could we not come over and give you an explanation? Old Yin, you're too polite. It wasn't the first time that everyone had interacted with Yin Zhongmu and the others. They didn't call him guild leader, or anything like that. Instead, they directly called him Old Yin to make it seem like they were close. Brother Yu's treatment of people was much better than his gaming skills. When Yin Zhongmu saw that the other side didn't treat him as an outsider, he naturally didn't put on airs anymore. His depressed expression was also revealed. Let's get to the point. What's the exact situation? Han family young master asked. The other side is very strong, Yin Zhongmu said. Especially when it comes to teamwork. Our guild's 50 or so brothers aren't weak either. We fought against 30 of them head-on, but 21 of us died. We didn't even manage to kill a single one of our opponents. The experts of Cloud City fell silent. They knew how strong Yin Zhongmu and the others were. They couldn't even kill a single one of their opponents in a head-on battle. This Eagle group was a bit too strong. This is the information we've gathered on the Eagle group for a day. Yin Zhongmu flipped through a few pieces of paper and handed them to Han family young master. At the same time he asked, "Where's Boss Sword Demon?" "He's in prison." Han family young master took the information and replied without raising his head. The other experts all gathered around to look at the information. Yin Zhongmu and the others had already gathered the names of the 30 experts of the Eagle group on the forums. The information on their equipment was scattered everywhere. It was possible to roughly estimate a person's level based on their equipment, but they couldn't be too accurate. Firstly, their equipment wasn't complete. Secondly, experts wouldn't only have a few pieces of equipment on them. Usually they would have a whole bunch of equipment to use. It was unknown how they would use their equipment in a real battle. Relying too much on the information on their equipment would definitely be disadvantageous. Even so, the pile of equipment information still caused the experts of Cloud City to sigh in surprise. They compared their own equipment and sighed from time to time. After flipping through a few pages, the experts looked at each other and came to a conclusion. Based on the standard of their equipment, they're definitely not inferior to us. Yin Zhongmu nodded as he expressed his opinion. Looking at these equipment, I think that if this was the normal way of playing the game, they'd all put together such strong equipment. This group of people's luck is a bit too good. Such a comprehensive set of equipment must have gone through a certain trading channel. Considering that there's still more equipment that hasn't been revealed here, I think the total value of these equipment can't be achieved without the support of a certain amount of RMB. You're right. Han family young master nodded. Moreover, the equipment in the parallel world sometimes has some regional characteristics. Brother Yu scanned through some of the famous equipment and said, based on their location in the southeast region, some of these equipment shouldn't have been traded normally, unless it's through a workshop, and it has to be a relatively large workshop that has a business network throughout the entire game. Brother Yu, isn't that obvious? Didn't you already know that they're from Eagle Workshop? That thing? This time Water Depth didn't use Eaglehound or Lackey to stab South Sword and the others. At first, they said they were hired. Looking at these equipment, it seems like the Eagle Party has a close relationship with the workshop. It's very likely that their strength is supported by the workshop. Brother Yu said. The experts all agreed with this. Everyone in the elite group was armed to the teeth, but they couldn't help but mention the extraordinary existence of Gu Fei. The generous rewards they received in the game, as well as the large amount of gold they earned, were all closely related to Gu Fei. Without Gu Fei, it was hard to say if they could have made it to the end of the mercenary group competition. None of them would use cash to enter the game. If it weren't for Gu Fei's multiple participation rewards and gold coins, it was hard to say whether they would have such luxurious equipment up to this point on their own. As for the 30 people in the Eagle Party, it didn't make sense that they didn't have a strong backer. As for South Sword and the others, they almost drooled when they saw the equipment of the Eagle Party. Their own equipment was worse than these people's. More importantly, they thought about the equipment of these people. Any one of them would be able to improve their lives. With this kind of equipment, do you think you can win one-on-one? Han family young master asked. That depends on the class. South Sword was always objective. If it's the same class, Han family young master said. There was nothing more fair than a PK between the same class. I think I'll be fine. Drifting smiled confidently. Humph, it's not a problem. Unscathed in battle said. I don't dare to be so sure, but I think I have a high chance of winning. The experts were obviously quite confident in their own skills. Yutian Shenming adjusted the 3 bows on his shoulder and said seriously, you can't just consider personal factors. Sometimes, you have to consider external factors, such as the terrain. Haha. Drifting laughed. Why are you laughing? Yutian Shenming was angry. What about the others? Han family young master looked at the other experts. Apart from the cleric, Blackwater, Glue, and the others were all silent. Left hand Love, right hand Handsome hesitated. Brother Yu even lowered his head. The other party's equipment was indeed beautiful and oppressive. It's always like this in a 1v1. In a team, they have the bonus of teamwork. Although we have my talent and skills, the other party has more people than us. It seems like our chances of winning are slim. Han family young master said. Everyone was silent. Yin Zhongmu frowned. After hesitating for a long time, he finally asked, where's Qianli? Of course, he knew that Qianli wasn't online. He only asked this because he wanted to know if Qianli would join the battle. He's not online. The answer was the same as he expected. That guy is an unknown number. Let's not count him yet. Han family young master said. He then asked Yin Zhongmu, what's their current state? Currently they seem to be scattered. They're wandering around. When they find someone from our guild that's alone, they immediately kill them. Yun Zhongmu said. Then did you guys organize a team to search? Han family young master was confused. We did. They're often active in the area around the revival point. We've searched everywhere, but we can't find them. Yun Zhongmu said regretfully. You guys know them? Han family young master said. We've had direct contact. Some of my brothers can recognize some of them. Yun Zhongmu said. He had a deep impression of the other party's leader. Of course, there was also that arrogant 8x3. So you're saying that when they attack you guys, they never cover their faces? Han family young master said. Right now, covering one's face had become a trend. Those who went out to kill people and didn't want revenge would cover their faces. Only people like Gu Fei would purposely let others see their faces and hope for revenge. Now, people didn't even want to look at his face. When they saw Purple Sword, they would want to avoid him. I'm curious that they never cover their faces. There's no camera function in the game. Even if we could search for their information on the forums, we wouldn't be able to find their faces. So if they covered their faces, it would be very advantageous. Yin Zhongmu said. They're demonstrating to you guys that they're not afraid of revenge. They're very arrogant. Han family young master said. Yin Zhongmu thought the same. Seeing that the others agreed, he clenched his teeth. But they haven't seen them even once. That's not necessary, right? Because they have a safe hiding place. Han family young master laughed coldly. What? Isn't it near the revival point? There would be a lot of people around any revival point, and it would be very lively. So, did Ing Chi's studio have a lot of shops around these places? Plus, you guys are afraid of their strength, so you'll search in groups. That way, most of the time, they'll find you first and not the other way around. They'll think of a way to avoid you, and if they can't avoid you, they'll immediately find a place to hide. I'm sure that Ing Chi has given them access to all of Moonlit Night City's properties. Han family young master said. Hearing this, everyone understood. Yin Zhongmu knocked his head and roared. Immediately gather people and block all of Ing Chi's shops. Actually, there were people from the 10 Societies Alliance watching over Ing Chi's shops, but at that time, they wanted to kill people and cause trouble. However, after the Eagle Group retaliated, some of these people were killed. Those who weren't killed responded to the call to gather, so naturally, there weren't any more people watching over them. It's no use. You don't have to go out if you want to. You can just use the teleportation scroll. Han family young master said. Guard the shops, then form teams to search for them. Yin Zhongmu said. How many shops does Ing Chi have? How many people do you have guarding each shop? If you have too many, do you still have people to search everywhere? If you don't have enough, what if they gather and eat you up? Han family young master said. We can still do this if we deploy our forces. Jian Nanyu was indeed an expert at killing and stealing. Han family young master nodded his head. It was clear that he had an idea. Yin Zhongmu wasn't stupid, and after thinking for a bit he said, should we gather our forces and clear them area by area? That's right. Since their people are scattered around the revival points, then it's impossible to gather 30 people at any one revival point. Thus, our team doesn't need too many people. Choose an area and lock down the streets. After the search team enters, we'll first guard all of Ing Chi's shops and then begin the search. Han family young master said. This method isn't bad. Yin Zhongmu frowned. But we can't let them know about this beforehand. However, we've clearly already had people in our guild who have been bribed by them. If we do this with so many people, there's no way we won't let them know. Our previous search team members were all reliable people. Han family young master had a look of disdain on his face. There's no need to tell them the real plan. We can just find someone we can trust to be the team leader and form a team. We can just find an excuse like a quest or something. Yin Zhongmu's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he slapped his forehead. That's right. Calculate the time and enter the area at the same time. Even if they realize, it'll be too late. Han family young master said. Great plan, great plan. Yin Zhongmu laughed out loud and immediately said to Duan Yun. Hurry up and set it up. Everything began to be carried out according to Han family young master's plan. Yin Zhongmu first personally brought people to search the various areas. However, his real goal was to gather the locations of Ingqi's shops in each area. Who would be the team leader for each shop was also assigned. Afterwards, they immediately started to gather people and form teams. There were all sorts of excuses and quests. The 10 Guild Alliance's style of doing things was quite straightforward, and the teams were quickly organized. However, Yun Zhongmu was a little worried about the number of people. If there was a spy in one of the teams who leaked the information and allowed the Eagle Group to ambush them, then it would be troublesome. However, Yun Zhongmu wasn't someone who couldn't take risks. If they were ambushed, then they would be ambushed. If they were ambushed, then they would be ambushed. If they were ambushed, then they would be ambushed. Yun Zhongmu didn't believe that thousands of people couldn't take down 30 people. In the end, this situation didn't happen, and the team successfully entered the main city. The players in the teams all thought that they were helping their team leaders do something. Some said it was a guild quest, some said it was a private job. No matter how big or small it was, there was a reason for so many people to be called out. The Eagle Group was causing trouble. The first plan was to be carried out at the warrior camp in Moonlit Night City. There were 6 main roads and a few alleys in the middle. Ingqi had a total of 3 shops here. The number of teams had been accurately calculated. 1 team would guard the safe area, 3 teams would guard Ingqi's shops, and the other 6 teams would guard the exits of the main roads. They didn't care about the alleys, because no matter how they walked in the alleys, they would have to go through the main roads to get out of this area. The distance and speed had all been calculated. The 10 teams arrived at their designated locations almost at the same time. All right, begin searching. Yun Zhongmu gave the order, and the search team quickly entered the area. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.